Hey guys, tonight we stand on the edge of an unending desert, each grain of sand like a tiny ember dancing across your skin as you gasp for relief. In this haze, every drop of water seems like an oasis that trickles farther the closer you get. So fair warning, you probably won't survive this pilgrimage unscathed. That's right, this story indulges in its own brand of cosmic cruelty. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time so I know exactly where and when you're joining this perilous voyage. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Feel the rough grooves of the ancient columns beneath your fingertips as the vapor of divine wine teases your nose, an invitation you can't accept quite yet. Anticipation hums in the air, and you're right on the brink of a fable that tastes sweeter than nectar, but carries a sting sharper than hemlock. You step into a marble hall that once echoed with the laughter of gods and mortals alike. The air shimmers with an otherworldly glow, and your eyes trace gilded reliefs depicting heroes whose names you half recognize. Here, Tantalus ruled as king of ancient Lydia, an Iron Age realm flourishing around 1200 BCE, blessed with gold so abundant it made nearby kingdoms blanch. Even as a human, he dined at tables heaped with ambrosia and nectar poured straight from the hand of Zeus, a mainstream fact immortalized in Homer's Iliad. Historians still argue whether these feasts reflected real cultic rituals or poetic exaggerations. A fringe rumor claims he once spiked the god's wine with a mind-bending herb from Mount Sipylus, though that sounds like the hottest cocktail of antiquity, and maybe your third joke you're about to get tipsy on tragedy. The polished ebony chair at the center seems almost to whisper your name, inviting you closer. Each torch's flame twitches as if chuckling at your folly no mortal was meant to sit among immortals. Hubris, you learn, was more than pride in ancient Greece. By the 5th century BCE, it was a legal offense in Athens, punishable by exile or fines. You almost chuckle at the thought, imagine getting a parking ticket for offending Zeus. But when you peer at the inlaid ivory panels, you sense that something darker brews here, something that would unmake a king's fortune faster than you can say Olympic-level temper tantrum. Beyond the hall's threshold lies a banquet table of polished silver, groaning under platters of roasted boar, sweet figs, and golden goblets brimming with divine wine. You catch a waft of spiced honey and charred fat, a combination so seductive that your stomach growls in protest, despite knowing better than to taste anything that could earn you a one-way ticket to the underworld. Fringe poets later whispered that Tantalus challenged the gods to guess the secret ingredient in his signature stew, an unthinkable slight for those who believed divine omniscience was absolute. Your pulse quickens as you recall the legend at one fateful feast. The gods hesitated over a single silver platter, their faces a mask of horror and shock. You can almost taste the tension like biting into a fruit that looks ripe but is riddled with worms inside. If you think that's bad, just wait until you learn the specifics of his crime, though really it's like showing up to a potluck and serving sushi made of rubber boots. Classic party foul. A hush falls over the hall as if the marble walls themselves hold their breath. Shadows twist and coil around the reliefs, bringing to life images of Pelops, Niobe, and other doomed descendants. You sense the weight of lineage and curse. One man's arrogance became a family heirloom of sorrow. Historians still argue whether the myth was crafted to explain local springs or to moralize about respect. Either way, nobody wants to be the guy who angers Olympus. In the dim glow, you spot a crack in the polished floor lines radiating like spider webs. Some say it opened when Tantalus' secret was revealed, a physical mark of cosmic outrage. Fringe scholars even speculated it was a volcanic vent, leaking steam into the palace as a warning sign, nature's own do not enter sign. You lean closer, feeling the tremor underfoot, and wonder if anyone ever placed a caution falling gods notice here. A distant rumble echoes through vaulted corridors, and you realize the Feast of the Ages is about to begin, but not as you might hope. There will be no laughter, only the hush of dread, and a single man's fate sealed by his own audacity. You brace yourself, reminding your sleepy self to breathe, to let the tale wash over you like that cool water you can't reach. You step out of the marble hall and into a sun-drenched courtyard, where the scent of wild thyme drifts on a breeze so warm it laps at your skin like a cat seeking attention. This is the realm of Tantalus, mortal king of Sipylus, a figure so woven into ancient lore that his name echoes through millennia. Sipylus was no mere backwater. Nestled at the foothills of Mount Sipylus in western Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, it flourished around 1200 BCE under a dynasty reputed for its wealth. You feel the crunch of limestone beneath your sandals as you follow a mosaic pathway dotted with gold dust that sparkles like breadcrumbs, leading you deeper into his domain, fit for a monarch whose treasures rivaled those of any deity. Historians still argue whether Tantalus was inspired by an actual Lydian chieftain or was entirely a poetic invention to explain local customs and springs, so you're left wondering if you're tracing real footsteps or chasing a mirage. Everywhere you look, there's evidence of opulence, pillared pavilions draped with embroidered tapestries, each stitch rumored to have been made from the fleece of sheared golden sheep. A mainstream fact, Lydia later became famous for minting the first known coins in the 7th century BCE, a practice perhaps foreshadowed by this earlier flair for metalwork. Imagine fossilized credit cards clinking in a bronze purse. In one corner, a statue of a lion clutching a ram's head stands guard. Local lore adds a quirky detail that Tantalus had commissioned automaton lions powered by water pressure to patrol his gardens, a fringe tidbit that reads like steampunk fan fiction. You can't help smirking at the thought of ancient hydraulic hipsters powering robo-lions to guard grapevines. You wander past an olive grove where twisted trunks bow toward the ground, as if rehearsing a dance offered to the gods. You pluck a sun-ripened olive and pop it between your teeth, noting its bitterness, mixed with honeyed undertones, a taste as contradictory as the man who ruled here. In the distance, you glimpse the Pactolus River, whose sands were said to carry flecks of gold that glittered under daylight. Legend has it that Croesus, Lydia's later king, grew fabulously rich by washing these sands. But you muse that Tantalus probably got their first piling hoard so vast he needed a payroll department just to count his ingots. As your footsteps echo through colonnades, you overhear birds arguing in a dialect that could be mistaken for ancient Lydian if anyone alive knew what that sounded like. You pause at a fresco depicting mortal feasts, roasted goat figs dripping with syrup, pomegranates split open like blood orange secrets. According to Homer's Odyssey, Tantalus dined with the gods sharing divine ambrosia. This was not a casual barbecue invite, but an exclusive tasting menu curated by Zeus himself. You can almost hear a waiter whisper, "Would you care for another glass of ambrosia, sire?" And you imagine Tantalus nodding, confident he could outcharm a god at cocktail hour. Yet beneath such grandeur simmers arrogance. You feel it in the way statues at his palace gaze down imperiously, as though reminding visitors that they stand in the presence of near-divine privilege. Fringe scholars speculate that Tantalus commissioned a throne of living asp vines that curled protectively around anyone foolish enough to sit talk about guardrails. You chuckle at the image modern safety standards would never approve of venomous living furniture. It's your second joke, neatly tucked between rosemary hedges. You pause at a circular pool fed by a hidden spring. A gulp of frosty water would soothe parched throats, except it remains forever, just out of reach. At least you think I'm not the only one. But hold that thought. You're meant to witness Tantalus in his prime here, when privilege turned precarious. You imagine palace chefs draping banquet tables with the finest linens, then stacking plates so high you'd need scaffolding to reach the grapes on top. Historians still argue whether such excesses reflect genuine Bronze Age opulence or later exaggerations by storytellers keen on moral lessons. You follow a corridor of polished obsidian mirrors reflecting every angle of your approach, like modern influencers snapping selfies for posterity. It strikes you as a dark joke. Even the walls wanted to admire Tantalus's figure, probably muttering 10 out of 10 for regal posture, 10 out of 10 for hubris. And yes, that's your third light jab gliding past without disturbing the hush. In that moment, you feel the weight of expectation crushing down, as if every gilded column is a finger wagging at your impending misstep. A distant clang echoes palace blacksmiths hammering bronze into ceremonial armor. You imagine Tantalus striding out in full regalia, his cloak sweeping behind him like a royal comet. But rumor insists he never donned the armor. Instead, he challenged gods to feats of strength in jests that later readers called tales of reckless bravado. You step closer, the metal's heat kissing your fingertips despite your distance. You wonder if that clang was a heartbeat, warning you that arrogance has a temperature all its own. Moving on, you trace your fingers over a carved relief of Pelops, Tantalus' son, whose story spirals into its own drama of chariot races and divine curses. This lineage spells doom. A curse was a family heirloom passed down like a tainted Fabergé egg. Fringe storytellers even whispered that the curse arrived in a mysterious scroll suffused with the venom of a Gorgon's gaze, pure myth, but entertaining to mull over as you imagine reading something so deadly it could petrify you with a glance. Finally, you reach a balcony overlooking terraced vineyards, their rows receding into hills that blur under the heat haze. You inhale deeply ripe grapes, crushed earth, and pine sap mingle in your senses. It's a place of plenty, yet it hums with unease. An undercurrent of all this could vanish in a heartbeat. It reminds you of that marble hall's cracked floor, an omen you nodded at earlier. Now you see it mirrored in the brittle vines that quake in a phantom wind. Hubris, you realize, is a seed that blooms where abundance runs unchecked. You stand there, feeling the sun's kiss and the weight of history pressing on your shoulders. Here was a king whose rule was so lavish that a single banquet could fund a small city for a year. Historians still argue whether his reign was remembered as a golden age or a cautionary tale of excess. But one thing's certain, Tantalus ruled at the edge of divine favor, flirting with power that mortals weren't meant to claim. As you turn to leave the balcony, the breeze carries a whisper. Maybe it's your own heartbeat. Maybe the sigh of ancient stones, but it urges you onward toward the next chapter of this grim fairy tale. You step through a grand archway carved with grapevines so lifelike you expect them to sway, and you find yourself amid Tantalus's legendary feast hall, an amphitheater of marble where the very air shimmers with the promise of ambrosia. Golden candelabra stand guard like statues come to life, dripping wax that smells sweet enough to drink. The scent of roasted lamb drifts over you, mingling with heady florals from wreaths of myrtle in every alcove. You hear low laughter echoing off the walls. So human it surprises you. Yet these voices belong to immortals reclining on couches of polished onyx. At the center, the gods feast with Tantalus. You notice Zeus, his thunderbolt, casually leaning against a gilt chair as he pours nectar into a crystal goblet the size of your skull. Hera adjusts her peplos, unfazed by peacock feathers brushing the floor. Poseidon lifts a crust of bread, dunking it into steaming broth that sighs like a miniature sea. Mainstream sources tell us that Homer described ambrosia as the food granting everlasting youth, akin to a cosmic smoothie with extra sprinkles, and here you see it in vivid form. Historians still argue whether ambrosia and nectar were literal cultic offerings or poetic metaphors for sacrificial wine and olive oil. You sidle closer to the silver platters heaped with truffles, pomegranate jewels, and honeycomb so pure it glistens like liquid amber. Tantalus raises his cup eyes, gleaming with pride. This is his moment, the summit of human achievement, bending knee before divine favor. Fringe rumors claim that he once had a secret spice blend harvested from the lair of a basilisk, a Hermesian pepper that could cleanse sins and colds in one bite. You wrinkle your nose, imagining spicy indigestion at Mount Olympus, and wonder if the gods had a celestial Pepto-Bismol on hand. A minstrel strums a lyre in the corner, the notes drifting like moths drawn to flame. The melody is alternately soothing and unsettling, as if reminding you that even music here has a divine edge. You glance at Dionysus lounging under a garland of grape leaves, a mischievous grin curling his lips. He takes a sip of wine that seems to sparkle with stardust. Fringe poets later spun tales that Tantalus challenged him to a drinking contest. Imagine one mortal keeping pace with the god of wine himself, though that story feels like college drinking folklore retold by a grandparent. You quip silently, hope they have designated drivers in Olympus. The feast extends outward crystalline bowls of figs scented with rosewater, warm barley cakes dripping with goat's milk syrup, and lotus blossoms steeped until their petals melt on the tongue. You reach for a cracker topped with sheep's cheese, but something tugs at your sleeve. It's Athena, curious how a mortal earned a seat at this table. She offers you a honey-dipped fig with a nod that feels like being handed an all-access pass. You laugh internally. I didn't even fill out the RSVP, yet you accept, tasting a harmony of sweet and tart so perfect it seems coated with divine intel. Historians still argue whether such divine hospitality was part of real Bronze Age rituals or later inventions to warn mortals against presumption. Above you, frescoes depict past banquets, gods feasting with Tantalus, while mortals looked on mouths agape. Some fringe art historians suggest these murals were redone periodically to insert new guests, talk about Photoshop before Photoshop. You crane your neck, noticing fresh brushstrokes around Hephaestus's forge scene. Maybe they updated the art when a new myth went viral. You chuckle at the thought of social media trends fluttering through Mount Olympus like winged Hermes. As platters revolve on a hidden mechanism, an automated marvel powered by concealed water channels, you marvel at the ingenuity. Mainstream scholarship notes that Greeks innovated basic water-driven devices by the 3rd century BCE, but here you see a precursor that must have astonished contemporaries. Fringe engineers claim Tantalus employed Trojan captives to build complex hydraulics. Imagine a forced labor engineering internship. You smirk, intern of the month, goat cheese edition. The gods share jokes at Tantalus's expense, a gentle ribbing about his choice of rose-water ratio, a quip that his honeycomb looked suspiciously like borrowed nectar stash. You hear Apollo tease him about his hairstyle, calling it Olympian fatigues, and a soft ripple of laughter follows. You feel oddly included by osmosis, a mortal absorbing divine mirth, like a sponge dipped in wine. It's your first joke, hope nobody's allergic to comedic hubris. Suddenly the table slows. You see Zeus's brow crease as he sets down his goblet. A hush falls. A single silver platter is lifted, revealing a glint of something soft and unnerving. The room tightens. Even the lyre's strings seem to pause. Tantalus smiles too broadly, as if he's about to reveal his party trick. You sense the shift in unspoken tension that makes your teeth itch. Fringe gossip claims that when this platter emerged, it glowed faintly, a magical alert to the gods that something was off. You shiver, recalling that marble floor crack you noticed earlier. Perhaps the palace itself was warning you. Then the whispers start. Hera's eyes narrow as she leans closer. Poseidon's grip on his goblet tightens. You watch as Tantalus lifts a single fork poised halfway to his mouth with the confidence of a celebrity chef unveiling a signature dish. You swallow, suddenly self-conscious of your own last meal, probably midnight ice cream. But that seems trivial now. Mainstream texts recount that at this moment, the gods recognized mortal flesh in divine company and recoiled. The myth says it was literal human meat on the gods' plates. Historians still argue whether this was originally a tale of sacrilege or a later moralistic addition to explain ritual taboos. The room goes silent except for the distant drip of melting wax. Tantalus straightens his grin, faltering as though the punchline of his greatest joke landed disastrously flat. You feel the air thicken like honey turning cold. The gods withdraw their hands, eyes hardened. You sense your own fingers curling into fists, an urge to stand, but also to flee. It's the aftermath of a cosmic cringe, the kind you get when you realize your best party trick just offended the host's boss. Before you can process further, lightning crackles outside. Zeus rises his robes, billowing like storm clouds. The candelabra flicker. The lyre's tune warps into a discordant note. In that suspended moment, you understand that this banquet, the pinnacle of mortal ambition, has shattered. The feast that promised eternal favor now heralds eternal punishment. You taste ash on the air, bitter as remorse. You take one last look at the abandoned platter, its cover now clattering on marble, as if abandoned in horror. The gods depart in silence, leaving the hall emptier than a modern airport at midnight. Only Tantalus remains standing amid half-eaten feasts that will never feed him again. And you, bleary-eyed, realize this sublime banquet was both the zenith of human reach and the nadir of divine mercy. You step back through the archway you entered, the shout of a distant thunderclap sending a shiver down your spine. The feast hall's doors swing shut with a finality that echoes in your bones. You carry the memory of sweet ambrosia tinged with tragedy, a taste you'll never wash away. And as you walk away, you can almost hear the gods whispering in the empty hall, their laughter now replaced by the hollow drip of unattended goblets. You stand before a jagged pillar of obsidian, its surface glinting like a dark promise, and you realize this is where Tantalus committed his unthinkable offense, a moment that snapped the fragile threads binding mortals to gods. It began as a jest, a flash of bravado that felt thrilling. At first, you imagine him swirling ambrosia in his goblet, his eyes dancing with the thrill of outsmarting immortals. Then, in a gesture part, challenge part twisted hospitality, Tantalus unveiled the centerpiece of his prideful show, a silver platter bearing the most forbidden fare, the flesh of his own son. Yes, Pelops, the apple of his eye, transformed into a grotesque offering meant to test divine omniscience. Historians still argue whether this element of the story was an original Greek detail or a sensational embellishment by later tragedians, and that debate simmers beneath every retelling. Fringe whispers even suggest the platter once bore a secret inscription in Lydian script reading Bon appetit, O high, one's a culinary insult etched in divine blood. You picture the gods reclining, their laughter tapering into a stunned silence as the platter is revealed. Hera's granitic gaze hardens. She pauses mid-toast wine sloshing at the rim of her goblet. Poseidon's trident resting casually nearby seems to vibrate with suppressed anger. The lyre's melody wavers as if it senses doom. Mainstream sources like Pindar's fragments record the horror. Plainly, the gods recognize Pelops by a missing shoulder, resurrecting him only after Demeter, distraught, had eaten part of him. You catch your breath, recalling that Demeter's grief drove her frantic search for Persephone, another myth born of a parent's despair. You bite back a shiver, wondering what gothic twist will unfold next. The hall's torches flicker shadows, twisting into accusing visages of Tantalus himself, their fiery tongues forming shapes that leer and whisper. You can almost hear a chorus chanting, "Sacrilege." A fringe theory claims the gods, appalled, felt a tremor beneath Olympus, as if the earth itself groaned against the crime. You step closer to a relief carved with Pelops's chariot race, the very race that would later define his destiny, and you sense the tragedy already written in stone. Tantalus, for his part, seemed unfazed. You imagine him smirking, believing he could flout the ultimate boundary mortalities divide from divinity. Only a fool or a father, drunk on hubris, would dare to substitute his own child for roast lamb. Third joke incoming. Talk about a bad dad joke. Yet beneath that glib thought is a knot in your stomach as you ponder a parent's betrayal taken to its darkest extreme. You notice the spectators' reactions. Athena's hand twitches toward her spear, as if to remind him that weapons of war are nothing compared to weapons of insult. Apollo turns away, his golden lyre's strings slack. Even Hephaestus, whose forge handles molten metals, drops a hammer so heavy it clangs like a death knell against the marble floor. Historians still argue whether the myth originally depicted Pelops's murder or if the tale evolved over centuries to symbolize taboo sacrificial rituals. Each nuance colors the scene. Was this a cautionary fable or a distorted reflection of brutal Bronze Age rites? Your fingertips brush runic carvings at the base of the pillar, an odd inclusion that seems Celtic rather than Hellenic. Fringe scribes insist later storytellers grafted foreign symbols onto Greek lore to amplify its reach. You glance skyward through an oculus overhead. The sunlight fractures into rainbows as it cuts through the torch's gloom, an ironic divine spectacle of beauty amid horror. A voice echoes in your mind. Did he really think the gods would mistake mortal for divine? It's a question you can't shake. The room feels colder, the air heavy with divine disappointment. You sense the gods drawing back as if stepping off a stage they can't trust. The lyre's melody resumes in a lower dirge-like tone, and you shiver at the contrast to the earlier jovial notes. Tantalus stands at the platter by now, a monument to hubris. You see the flash of realization cross his face when the gods recoil, shock giving way to panic. His grin clenches into a grim line. The banquet table, once a bridge between earthly and celestial delights, has become a chasm splitting them apart. You imagine him shouting, "It's just meat," only to be met with stony silence and a thunderous rumble from beyond the palace walls. Lightning dances across the distant underworld sky, illuminating stalactites and caverns that yawn open like hungry mouths. Mainstream poets like Ovid recount how the earth trembled and fissures cracked, swallowing Tantalus's offerings whole. His silver platter clanged as it dropped into the abyss. You imagine the sound echoing for eternity, a metallic reminder of divine wrath. Historians still argue whether such meteorological fury reflects real seismic activity in Anatolia or is purely mythic flourish. You step back as the gods rise. Zeus's lightning bolt arcs from his hand, scorching the air with ozone's sharp tang. The other deities echo with their own fury, every elemental power at their disposal. You feel the hairs on your neck stand on end. Wind gusts swirl, waters churn, and the scent of sulfur drifts in, as if the underworld itself exhaled. Fringe accounts claim that the god's anger carved the river Phlegethon in the underworld, naming it Blaze of Retribution. You roll your eyes at the dramatic flare, but can't deny the chill it sends through your marrow. Then, in a voice that reverberates like thunder rolling through your chest, Zeus pronounces the sentence, "Eternal torment." In the shadowy depths, thirsty, always never sated. You hear it as a verdict punching through your ribs, a cosmic gavel, sealing Tantalus's fate. His eyes widen, the weight of his crime finally settling in like lead in a chalice. You sense his knees buckle, but he steels himself, refusing to bow, even to save his soul. And in that moment, the banquet hall fractures. The mosaic floor shatters like glass underfoot fissures, spreading outward, devouring every gold-inlaid tile. You stumble back, the shards of history crunching beneath your sandals. The torches snuff out, plunging you into a silence so deep it hums. You catch one last glimpse, Tantalus' arms outstretched toward a breaking pool, his face a mask of precious desperation. The gods vanish in a flash of blinding light, leaving behind only the echo of divine disfavor. You choke on the absence of their laughter, the cold emptiness ringing louder than any feast ever could. You turn and sprint for the archway, heart pounding as if your own flesh were at stake. Behind you, the obsidian pillar cracks and collapses, its ruin marking your final exit from the crime scene of the cosmos. You burst into daylight, the sun's warmth grounding you as reality settles back in. Yet in your chest, the rhythm of divine outrage still thunders, reminding you that some boundaries, mortal and otherwise, must never be crossed. You step through a crackling veil of shadow that swallows the sun's warmth, and suddenly the air tastes of damp stone and distant thunder. Before you looms the gate of Tartarus, iron rivets glinting like the eyes of unseen sentinels. The threshold throbs with an otherworldly hum, an electric current of dread that prickles your skin like standing too close to a high-voltage wire. You probably won't survive this trolley ride to cosmic jail without feeling a chill in your bones. Historians note that Hesiod's Theogony first describes Tartarus as both a deity and a place of punishment comparable to the abyss in later traditions. Historians still argue whether ancient Greeks envisioned Tartarus as a literal chasm beneath the earth or a metaphorical dungeon of the soul. The massive doors tower above you, forged from bronze darker than a storm cloud. Faint runes crawl across their surface, etched in a language that predates written Greek. Some fringe researchers claim they're the remnants of a Proto-Indo-European curse, though that sounds about as plausible as Wi-Fi in the Bronze Age. You press a hand to the cold metal. It vibrates with the weight of every soul bound within. A gust of sulphurous wind escapes between the doors, carrying the scent of brimstone and regret. You cough, imagining the Yelp review. 1 star wouldn't recommend gates were a bit stiff and the ambiance too gloomy. A pair of great hounds emerges from the shadows, sinewy beasts with eyes like molten gold. Their teeth glint as they pant, tongues flicking with steam. You remind yourself, they're not the family pet. These are the guardians of the underworld, akin to Cerberus's less famous siblings. Fringe mythographers suggest Tartarus once held a brood of 10-headed hounds before Zeus revamped the security team. Talk about a divine org chart restructuring. You slip a glance at the enormous key dangling from an unseen lock, swinging like a pendulum of doom. Beneath the gate arches, you spot a fissure in the rock, perhaps a sliver of light from the primordial chaos beyond, or simply another architectural crack. Either way, it mirrors that marble hall fracture you saw back home, tying your nightmares together in unsettling harmony. Beyond the gate lies a yawning chasm, pitiless in its vastness. Ropes of mist coil around stalactites overhead, dripping cold condensation onto your shoulders. You feel the weight of the world pressed down as if Atlas himself leaned a bit too hard. According to Pausanias, Tartarus was so deep that if an anvil fell for 9 days and nights, it still wouldn't reach the bottom. Imagine downloading a file that never finishes after 9 workdays. You wonder if the ancients would have appreciated cloud storage. Your footsteps echo on slick basalt paths flanked by towering walls of sheer rock. The flicker of torchlight reveals bas-reliefs carved into the stone scenes of Sisyphus, eternally pushing his boulder Ixion bound to a flaming wheel, and Tydeus stretched flat as a sacrificial victim. One relief shows Tantalus once again, arms outstretched toward water that pools at his feet. You feel a shiver as you pass. It's like meeting your own best fears face to face. Fringe archaeologists claim these reliefs glow under the light of a new moon, but you're not about to camp here to find out. A low rumble echoes through the cavern like an industrial fan you forgot to turn off. You guard your ears as if a jackhammer lurks around the bend. The path descends gradually each step, taking you deeper into a domain where daylight is myth and hope is a distant rumor. The air grows heavier. Every breath feels like inhaling the past's regrets. A stray droplet plinks somewhere above the sound, resonating like a missing beat in your heartbeat. You round a bend, and a colossal chain hangs from the ceiling links as thick as tree trunks. It sways gently, as though someone or something once used it to shackle giants. You run a hand along a cool link, marveling at the craftsmanship. Mainstream scholars observe that chains and shackles in underworld myths symbolize the bonds of sin, not literal devices. Historians still argue whether these were added by later storytellers to moralize the myth, or if they reflect Bronze Age penal practices. A fringe theory posits that Tartarus was an actual open-pit prison for political prisoners in ancient Anatolia, a Gitmo of the Bronze Age, if you will, though evidence is thinner than Zeus's patience with Tantalus. The corridor splits into multiple forks, each labeled with worn inscriptions pointing to different torments. You follow an arrow marked Tantalus in looping script that seems to pulse under your gaze. The walls here hum with a low vibration, as if the stones themselves whisper his name in muted agony. You tread carefully, mindful not to disturb the silence, though frankly you wouldn't want to accidentally step on a rock and set Symphony No. 5 of underworld tension loose. Ahead, you glimpse a faint luminescence, the reflection of water glimmering from a pool at the corridor's end. Your pulse hammers. You quicken your pace, heart echoing like a bass drum in a stadium. The story warns you, Tantalus's torment lies at that very pool, a punishment tailored to his sin. Yet the reflex of reaching for relief is instinctual. You slow yourself, reminding your twitchy lungs that this could be a mirage, a cruel test of the senses. As you approach, the smell of damp earth intensifies, mingling with a sweet, elusive hint of citrus, like a lemon dropped in a swamp. A fringe detail suggests that the pool's scent shifts based on one's unfulfilled desires, one day orange the next. Mint, an absurd concept that conjures images of underworld aromatherapy. You smirk at the thought of a demon saying, "Today's menu peppermint anguish." The pool lies in a shallow basin water, still as polished mirror reflecting an inverted sky of glowing stalactites. You kneel, fingertips hovering above the glassy surface. For a moment, you taste the moisture on your lips, convinced it's real. Then, with a flicker, the water recedes, sliding down the basin's edges like a curtain drawing closed on hope. You lean forward, chest tight, but the liquid retreats beyond reach once more. A dripping echo resonates in the chamber, a mocking applause. You stagger back, chest heaving, as a whisper brushes your ear. "Stay thirsty, friend." You spin, but only shadow greets you. The hounds are gone, and even the chain seems motionless, as though frozen in contempt. A distant roar sounds part wind, part sorrowful lament. It lingers in the cavern, embedding itself into your bones. You rise to your full height, palms slick with condensation. The gate of Tartarus stands silent behind you, its doors sealed as though nothing of your passage remains. Yet you carry the echo of Tantalus's endless thirst in your own throat, a feather-light reminder that desire can become its own prison. You turn, stepping away from the pool, heart pounding out a warning drumbeat. Behind you, another corridor opens, this one marked with a twisted pillar crowned by unreachable fruit. You steady yourself, knowing that this labyrinth is built to torment the senses, each turning a new test of will. You breathe in the cold, damp air and steel yourself for what lies ahead, closer to the heart of Tantalus's punishment, where fruit forever dangles beyond your grasp. As you move on, the distant drip of water follows you, a haunting accompaniment to your descent. You let the rhythm settle into your bones, an unwelcome lullaby, guiding you deeper into the realm where want is the only constant. You step into a vast cavern where the torchlight trembles against rock walls dripping with moisture, and your breath catches at the sight before you, a crystalline pool that gleams like liquid silver, its surface so smooth it mirrors the jagged stalactites above and beyond it, a tree heavy with fruit whose branches arch tantalizingly within arm's reach. The air here is cool and damp, carrying the faint tang of metal and moss, a sensory symphony that both soothes and unsettles your nerves. You might clutch your throat reflexively, longing for that mirrored refreshment, yet knowing the myth warns it will vanish as you approach. You probably won't survive this, but at least you get a killer view. The pool sits in a shallow basin carved by ancient hands, its water sourced from unseen springs, rumored to flow from the river Styx itself. Mainstream mythographers note that circa the 8th century BCE, Greek poets first described this imagery of unreachable sustenance, hinting at Bronze Age anxieties over famine and drought. Historians still argue whether these descriptions were allegories for seasonal scarcity or reflections of actual spring-fed sanctuaries at mountaintop shrines. Fringe theorists even propose the pool is based on the ritual clepsydra, water clocks used in archaic temples, a device that measured time by the flow of water, symbolizing life's fleeting moments. You smirk at the idea of cosmic timekeeping, imagining Tantalus checking his watch 5 more minutes till eternity. The tree towering behind the water glows with an otherworldly luminescence, its trunk twisted like a dancer's spine, and its leaves shimmering emerald despite the cavern's gloom. Hundreds of fruits hang like lanterns of deep ambrosial red and gold. You inhale the scent of ripe pomegranate and honeysuckle, heady enough to make your head spin if only you dared lean in. A sheer branch drapes over the pool's edge, droplets falling from its leaves in a soft staccato patter that echoes like a muted applause for Tantalus's suffering. Fringe raconteurs whisper that the tree is an inverted U, grafted from the branches of Yggdrasil, the Norse world tree, an absurd but poetic notion that binds mythic worlds. You kneel at the water's edge, fingertips quivering as you hover above the surface. It holds a mirror to your own face, pale and determined, yet fractured by the wavering light. The pool beckons you, its glassy calm promises solace. You dip a finger in tasting the chill that bites like a fresh wound healed too quickly. At the instant you lean forward, the water recedes in slow-motion agony, the liquid sliding away, like the curtain on your greatest hope. You gasp as it drains, leaving only a shallow ring of wet stone. A fringe detail claims that on moonless nights the pool runs black, an ink-like void that foretells doom. But even in this faint glow, its trick is unmistakable. Your gaze flicks to the fruit. A pomegranate glistens closest, its leathery skin flecked with dew, and its arils plump like rubies. You reach with a trembling hand, brushing the smooth skin. The branches shudder, and the fruit sways just beyond reach as though dancing out of courtesy. You stretch further fingertips, brushing velvet softness, only to feel the branch lift, retracting upward like a playful serpent. Historians still argue whether the motif of unreachable fruit reflects Bronze Age pilgrim rites, where initiates were forbidden to touch sacred offerings, or later Hellenistic additions meant to dramatize Tantalus's plight. You chuckle, forbidden fruit. Been there, regretted that. Behind you, the walls bear carved panels illustrating Tantalus's successive failures. Each attempt to drink or pluck fruit is immortalized in stone reliefs that loop endlessly. You study one scene where he leans so far, he tips forward, his face inches from the pool as water recedes. Another shows him grasping for a cluster of grapes, only for them to angle skyward. A fringe claim suggests these reliefs were painted with phosphorescent pigments to glow in the dark, a ghostly gallery of torment. You shiver, imagining navigating here at midnight, guided by spectral artworks. The cavern's ceiling arches high, lost in shadows, but you catch a flicker as if eyes watch you from the dark. The hush is absolute save for that tormenting drip of unseen water sources. You close your eyes and hear your own heartbeat echoing back at you, a pounding reminder that you are alive but desperate. A gentle breeze wafts through, carrying a scent of citrus zest mixed with damp limestone, a fragrance so contradictory it makes your pulse hitch with new longing. You stand and circle the basin, searching for a different angle, another vantage where the fruit might stay still or the water might pause its cruel retreat. But it's a perfectly orchestrated trap. No vantage works, no timing suffices. Fringe storytellers relate that Tantalus once hired a blind oracle to time his attempts, but even she could not outsmart the enchantment. You grin at the romantic folly of that gambit. Knowledge doesn't always equal liberation. Pausing, you notice small, fish-like shapes in the pool's depths darting away as your shadow falls across the basin. Mainstream interpretations say this detail underscores life's furtiveness. Just when fulfillment seems near, it slips away. Historians still argue whether such details were meant to add realism or heighten the allegory. You lean closer, craving those beauties, but the moment your shadow veils the basin, they vanish into darker water, leaving only emptiness in their wake. Above, a single drop plummets from a stalactite, a bead of moisture that hovers a fraction of a second before rebounding off the rock. The sound rings out ping, and your heart stutters. It's like an eternal metronome marking every failed attempt, a private soundtrack of despair. Fringe alchemists even posited that these drops were tears of the Earth Mother mourning Tantalus' sin. You sniff, half amused, half pained at the fertility goddess weeping over cosmic cruelty. You circle back to the tree, its bark warm under your palm as if it pulses with latent life. A low hum emanates from the trunk, akin to a purring engine, an absurd mechanistic undercurrent in classical myth. You glance around, half expecting hidden gears, or gears spiraling a Ferris wheel of misery. The juxtaposition of natural wonder and mechanical cruelty makes you question, is this divine punishment or cosmic performance art? Historians still argue whether ancient audiences saw myth in theatrical terms, complete with stagecraft, or whether the stories remain purely oral. A sudden rumble shakes the cavern, dust sprinkling down like brittle rain. You brace yourself, gripping the tree's trunk, only to see nothing fall, a phantom tremor that echoes in your bones. Fringe geologists suggest it's the sound of tectonic plates shifting deep within Tartarus, a geological lament for the damned. You roll your eyes at the pseudoscience, yet feel your resolve waver. Leaning close, you place your palm on the rock beside the basin and close your eyes. You imagine the feel of cool, fresh water sliding down your throat, the sweet give of fruit bursting in your mouth. For a heartbeat, the world seems to hold still. The pool stops its retreat, and a branch lowers an inch. You open your eyes, breath-held heart racing. But as reality snaps back, the water slides away, the fruit lifts skyward, and the cavern's hush presses in like an accusatory finger. You stagger back, heart pounding, and the tree's leaves rustle as though in pity. A whisper skims past your ear forever. You whirl around. The cavern is empty, yet that single word hangs in the air, christening your soul. The reflection in the empty pool now shows only flickering torchlight and your hollow expression. You step away, emerging from the circle of torment, but the drip of water follows a ghostly cadence that lodges itself in your mind. The tree stands silent behind you, its fruit still ripening, still unreachable. You carry with you the echo of every failed reach, an indelible reminder that some desires are meant to haunt, not to gratify. Ahead, the corridor forks toward new torments, but you pause a moment longer, tasting the bitterness of longing. Then, steeling yourself against the memory, you move on, deeper into Tantalus's realm of eternal want, where thirst is the only certainty and satiation a forgotten dream. You lower yourself beside the basin once more, every muscle taut with anticipation, and you watch that shimmering pool as if it holds the secret to your very survival. The water's surface quivers under your gaze, mirroring the dance of torchlight above, and for a breathless second it feels poised to grant you relief, only to retreat as you reach. Your fingertips break the mirror, only to feel slick stone where liquid should be leaving you gasping at the betrayal of something so essential. You probably won't survive this parched labyrinth without a sip of imagination, but it's a neat trick, right? This isn't the first time humans have wrestled with elusive waters. Mainstream scholarship notes that by the 6th century BCE, Greeks used clepsydrae water clocks invented by Chrysippus to measure speeches in courts where dripping water pinned orators to unforgiving time limits. You smirk. Imagine giving a TED Talk here. Your 1 minute is literally slipping away. Historians still argue whether such water clocks influenced mythic imagery of elusive springs or remained purely civic gadgets. Fringe theorists even propose that ancient engineers experimented with siphons that caused real springs to ebb and flow, inspiring storytellers to paint punishment in hydrodynamic strokes. You roll your eyes at that nerdy speculation water-themed myth or proto-engineering experiment. Both sound like plumbing gone rogue. You press your hand to the pool's edge, feeling the temperature shift from a biting chill to a velvet warmth as the water recoils. The tactile betrayal sends a jolt through your arm, making goose flesh rise on your forearm, despite the cavern's damp cool. A single droplet escapes your grasp, splashing into the basin and echoing like a taunt plink before vanishing into emptiness. Third joke. If this were speed dating, the water just ghosted me. Behind you, the carved reliefs flicker in the torchlight, replaying the endless cycle Tantalus's face, inches from water lips parted only to see it ebb away. You trace one panel showing him kneeling arms dangling an expression of desperate hope frozen in stone. A fringe art historian insisted these reliefs were originally painted with water-soluble pigments so that each reenactment of the myth literally washed away the colors, an annual ritual of collective forgetting. You chuckle, DIY frescoes, ancient Instagram filters anyone, yet you shiver at the thought of ritual reenactments that dissolve in tears and rain. You lean closer to the basin and inhale the scent of damp limestone mingled with something sweet, like crushed mint leaves dropped into a muddy stream. Fringe gossip claims that the pool's scent adapts to the sinner. On Tantalus's birthday, it smells of burnt honey. On Zeus's feast day of spiced wine. You wrinkle your nose. Underworld eau de toilette, nature's cruelty perfume. You steady your breathing, attempting to quell the mounting frustration. With each extension of your arm, the water ripples, then withdraws, as if the pool itself recoils at your touch. It's a cruel choreography, an endless tease. A modern psychologist might call this operant conditioning, but in this cavern, any theoretical framework feels like clutching at straws, especially when those straws vanish into empty air. Your mind drifts to desert mirages, optical illusions of water teasing thirsty travelers across sand. Ancient Greek writers like Pliny the Elder recorded travelers mistaking salt flats for oasis pools only to collapse in dust. Historians still argue whether such desert tales lent the myth of Tantalus an extra layer of poetic irony, or if the story preceded those travelogues. Fringe desert explorers claim that certain mineral salts could refract light to conjure perfect water illusions, basically nature's own Snapchat filter. You smirk at the idea of a geologist swiping through ghost images on a dune. You rise to your knees, pulses hammering, and view the pool from a side angle. Perhaps you think if you approach diagonally or shimmy along the basin's rim, the enchantment might skip a beat. You tilt your body, sliding hands along the wet stone, only to see the water recoil with uncanny precision. It's as if an invisible hand orchestrates the liquid's ebb. Physical laws here obey divine whimsy rather than gravity. You stand upright, feeling no wiser than before a cosmic lesson in futility. A hushed whisper echoes, "Try again." You spin, but the cavern holds only darkness and dripping echoes. The moisture on your lips tastes faintly metallic, iron maybe, or the tang of blood remembered. A fringe myth suggests Tantalus's pool is laced with a drop of Titan blood, giving it an otherworldly shimmer and sinister recoil, baseless but evocative. You grimace at the macabre flourish, wishing for simpler punishment, like public speaking without water. The pool's retreat reveals concentric rings of damp stone, each one marking a failed attempt. You crouch to study them near parallel bands that look like geological strata of despair. You note the depths 1 inch, 2 inches, and so, on a timeline of defeat etched in rock. It's a bar chart of frustration that even the driest data analyst would pity. You joke under your breath, data visualization by Hades Analytics. A sudden splash jolts you. Someone or something has tossed a pebble into the pool. You whirl around expecting a mischievous spirit, but find only mist curling from the cavern's ceiling. Your heart races. The echo of that splash reverberates too deliberately to be random. Second joke. If that was Zeus launching a pebble, I'd like a rematch. You press your palm again to the basin's lip, this time cupping a small hollow and leaning in to taste the memory of moisture. The surface shivers, then slips away. You swallow hard, the phantom flavor dissolving into bitter stone. Hunger's ghost joins thirst's ache, turning sensation into longing squared. Up ahead, the corridor opens toward craggy steps leading deeper into the gloom, but you linger transfixed by the pool's cruel beauty. A solitary stalactite drips overhead, a slow measured drop that lands with a signature ping. You count each echo 1, 2, 3 before the pattern shift, and you lose track. It's an auditory metronome syncing with your ragged heartbeat. Fringe poets romanticize this drip as time itself weeping for the damned, an unrealistic scenario, since they probably never heard it live. You rise, brushing damp hair from your brow, and take one last glance. The water still glitters, the fruit still beckons just beyond, but the pool's lesson is clear. Some yearnings are traps masquerading as salvation. You feel a pang of pity for Tantalus, condemned to an equally unending loop. That empathy prickles your conscience. Perhaps this punishment was more complex than cosmic slapstick, a moral mirror held up to anyone who dares overreach. Gathering your resolve, you turn away from the basin and rise to your feet. The path to the next chamber beckons, etched with warnings. Here fruit forever dances. Their shade flickers like false comfort. You breathe deeply, attempting calm, but the echo of that last drip lingers as you step forward. Just before the corridor dips into darkness, you pause and whisper a farewell to that shimmering pool, an acknowledgement that some desires are not meant for fulfillment, but to remind us of our limits. You take a final breath of damp air, letting it fill your lungs like a sacrificial offering, and then you move on, the whisper of "stay thirsty" trailing behind you like a persistent shadow. You step into a low-lit alcove where the cavern narrows and the scent of warm pomegranate and honeyed figs wraps around you like a velvet cloak. Before you stands the tree of eternal teas, its gnarled trunk rooted in stone and its branches weighed down by fruit so vivid they glow like molten rubies in the torchlight. You reach out, heart-hammering fruit, juicy and ripe, promises relief of a different kind. Yet the moment your fingers graze the leathery skin, the branch coils upward as if alive, lifting the bounty just beyond reach. You probably won't survive this orchard without a good arm workout, but hey, it's the world's most exclusive fruit-picking gig. This motif of unreachable fruit isn't unique to Tantalus's torture. Pomegranates held sacred status in Bronze Age cultures across the Mediterranean. Mainstream archaeobotany shows that by 1500 BCE, Minoans cultivated pomegranate groves for ritual and culinary uses, their seeds symbolizing life's cycles. Historians still argue whether these practices inspired the myth's fruit imagery or if the fable predated actual horticulture. Fringe folklorists even claim the tree is grafted from a hybrid of Hesperides' golden apples and the Norse Yggdrasil, an implausible but poetic crossover that paints mythologies as cosmic crossover events. You grin at the thought, Marvel versus DC of ancient lore. The tree's bark is smooth to your touch, warm like sun-baked leather, and fine veins of translucent resin snake along its surface, shimmering under torch flame. You inhale deeply, a heady perfume of citrus zest, crushed mint, and a hint of resin, a blend so contradictory it makes your senses tingle. Remember that metallic tang from the pool. This scent dances just behind it, a soft reminder that every sense in this underworld carnival is on insane mode. You stretch upward, fingertips grazing a cluster of grapes glistening with dew. Their spheres seem fuller than any mortal vine could yield, each orb a promise of sweetness and respite. Fringe horticultural legends suggest these grapes are grown from seeds carried by Hermes himself, blown from Olympus in a gust so strong it scattered divine vines across Tartarus. You snort divine wind pollination talk about zephyr-powered agriculture. Your second joke slips out. Hope there's a myth about yeast handling the fermentation too. As you extend on tiptoe, a breeze stirs just enough to sway the branch, and the fruit saunters higher, taunting you with its ripeness. You shift sideways, leaning on a root twisted like a dancer's knee, hoping a new angle might work. But the branches obey a cruel choreography, always retreating, always just out of reach. It's a performance perfected over eons, an eternal fruit tango that leaves your arms trembling. Historians still argue whether the recalcitrant branches symbolize the capriciousness of fate or were merely later dramatic additions by Hellenistic tragedians seeking more theatrical flair. You press one foot against the stone wall and try a running leap. Mid-hop time seems to pause, fruit hangs in midair as if savoring your desperate lunge. Then gravity reasserts itself and you land on your heels, breath rasping. Your palms sting where they scrape the branch. Third joke. Is this what they meant by reach for the stars? Because these grapes are definitely star quality. Leaning against the trunk, you notice small, silvery scars where past seekers carved their names, initials worn smooth by countless hands. Each carve feels like a prayer scratched into bark. Here lies hope. A fringe rumor claims that on solstice nights, those carvings bleed sap that tastes like ambrosia, granting temporary restoration of strength if only you dared taste tree blood. You shudder at the gothic imagery, but can't deny the allure of a boost. Then again, tree sap's stickiness probably isn't great for long-term comfort. You circle the tree, tracing its roots as they coil over the rocky floor, each root like a living sentinel blocking your path. Moss carpets the gaps cool underfoot, and tiny mushrooms cluster where moisture seeps. You crouch, brushing a velvety cap, its spores shimmer as if dusted with gold. Fringe mycologists speculate these mushrooms are cousins to the fabled lotus petals that induce forgetfulness. One bite might erase the torment of never reaching fruit. You smirk. Forget the myth. Forget your woes until you remember you forgot. Typical bardic irony. Rising, you face the tree once more. A single branch dips tantalizingly low-heavy, with a lone pomegranate whose crown-like calyx beckons like a jeweled tiara. You step forward, muscles coiled ready for the final grab. The air hums, anticipation tightening your chest, as if the cavern itself holds its breath. You lunge, fingers brushing pomegranate skin, and in that breath's stretch, the branch jerks upward with a soft thwip, delivering the fruit beyond your grasp. You land on your knees, chest heaving. It's the cruelest of betrayals when desire tastes within reach, only to slip away at the last heartbeat. The torchlight flickers, casting dancing shadows across the fruit's red sheen. You half expect a voice to whisper, "Nice try," but only silence answers. Your palms press against the rock dust, smearing fine grit across your skin, an abrasive souvenir of failure. You rise and inspect the bark above eye-level scratch marks where claws, perhaps your own, left fleeting impressions. Fringe anthropologists posit these marks mirror ritualistic self-scarification, an act of penitence for mortal overreach. You wince at the thought of carving flesh to reach fruit self-harm, as mythic metaphor, dark stuff indeed. You pause to catch your breath, gazing at that lone pomegranate glimmering like a star you can't touch. The cavern's hush envelops you, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water you've left behind. It feels like a lullaby of unfulfilled promise. Remember that dripping stalactite's metronome. Its rhythm syncs with your pulse, now each plink marking another moment you went for glory and found emptiness instead. A breeze stirs again, and a leaf flutters down, brushing your cheek, an intimate, mocking caress. You brush it aside, heart-pounding senses strung taut. The tree hums a low vibration you sense more than hear, like a purring beast content in its cruel game. Fringe sound historians argue this hum is an auditory illusion created by air currents through hollow roots, yet it feels charged with intent, as though the tree itself delights in your torment. You press your palm one last time to a root feeling warmth radiate upward as if the tree pulses with life beyond the dead world around it. It's a reminder power lies in abundance, but here it twists into punishment. You inhale the scent of fruit so ripe it seems almost sinful, and you lean close enough to see the beads of dew gathering at its stem. With that final impossible reach, you taste phantom sweetness on your lips and a burst of longing in your chest. Stepping back, you cradle your arm where the bark nicked your skin, an echo of the physical cost of desire. The cavern opens ahead into a wider gallery where shadows play tricks on the wall, beckoning you onward. Yet you linger, casting one last glance at the tree of eternal teas. Its branches sway laden with fruit you've tried and failed to claim, and in that moment, you understand the essence of Tantalus's torment, endless yearning without consummation. You turn and walk away, the fruit's glow fading behind you, but its memory clings to your senses, the ache of unfulfilled reach, the sting of denial, and the haunting beauty of temptation itself. As you step into the next corridor, the tree's soft hum fades, yet you carry its lesson. Some desires are crafted not for satisfaction, but to remind us of our mortal limits. You trudge forward on slick stone, every step amplifying the hollowness in your belly that roils like storm-tossed seas. The corridor here is narrow, flanked by walls etched with scenes of famine, gaunt figures clawing at empty bowls, their ribs exposed like the struts of abandoned ships. The air is thick with the scent of stale grain and saltpeter, a dusty perfume that makes your stomach clench in sympathy. You probably won't survive this gauntlet of cravings without a snack bar, but at least the views are educational. A mainstream fact in Bronze Age palaces such as Knossos, circa 1700 BCE granaries stored barley, wheat, and legumes to last lean seasons, illustrating ancient concerns over famine and provision. You smirk at the thought, imagine having to worry about a bad harvest after dinner. Historians still argue whether these storerooms inspired mythic imagery of empty larders, or if poets simply weaponized real shortages for dramatic effect. Fringe anthropologists suggest that Tantalus's hunger pangs were based on ritual fasts practiced by certain Anatolian cults, fasts so extreme they bordered on sensory deprivation, a notion that feels both mystic and masochistic. The corridor widens into a chamber lit by flickering torches, set in iron brackets carved like wailing faces. You catch a whiff of something half-rotted and half-sweet, like fermented fruit left too long in the sun. Your mouth floods with saliva, despite your mind shouting, "Don't taste that swamp smoothie." A fringe rumor claims that the underworld's rot-scented air was an ancient method of psychological torture, triggering nausea and hallucinations in those most vulnerable. You chuckle weakly, modern prisons could save on fees, just open a few barrels of dung and call it therapy. As you press onward, your stomach growls so loud it echoes like a theatrical drumroll. You can almost taste the phantom flavors, fresh olive oil drizzled on hot bread, salted goat cheese melting on the tongue, sweet figs plucked from sun-ripened clusters. It's like living on the memory of a feast you never attended. You blink and half expect the walls to sprout banquet tables. Instead, you see niches carved into the stone empty clay jars that once held cereals, now cracked and barren. Each jar mocks you with its emptiness. You pause at one alcove, fingertips brushing the rim of a clay pot. It still bears a faint seal of the Lydian royal workshop, a lion and bull locked in mortal combat. You tap it gently, and it thuds hollowly, a coffin for sustenance. Historians still argue whether these seals indicated tax payment or ritual significance, but here they feel like cosmic breadcrumbs, leading only to more disappointment. A sudden skittering sound draws your gaze to the floor, where mice dart from shadow to shadow, their small forms sleek with hunger too. They skitter around your feet, eyes gleaming like dark beads. Fringe pest control experts posit that underworld vermin were thought to absorb lost souls, each mouse a soul snatcher nibbling on memory. You grimace, great, even rodents are freeloaders here. You steel yourself and press on. Drips echo from overhead, each plink igniting fresh pangs of longing. You recall the dripping stalactite above Tantalus's pool, its metronome ticked off desires, and here it marks famished moments. You close your eyes and hear your own heartbeat join the drip, a duet of despair. Its uncanny hunger becomes a sensory symphony, every sound exaggerated in the hush of this stone tomb. Your fingers drift to your belt, hunting for a crumb or dried fruit, your last hope. But your satchel is empty, uncomfortably so. You pat each pocket, nothing. You wanted a granola bar, a piece of jerky, anything to quell this revolt in your gut. It's a cruel twist. You came armed with modern expectations, yet this realm admits no contraband. Fringe speculators joke that Tantalus' sentence included an X-ray that confiscated all food before entry a security measure, so thorough it makes airport TSA look lazy. You smirk, if only they had luggage lockers down here. Ahead, the ceiling dips low steam rising from cracks and fissures in the walls. The heat stings like a breath of hellfire, intensifying thirst into new agony. Sweat beads at your brow, mixing with tears you won't admit to shedding. Your tongue feels swollen, each swallow a choreographed performance of pain. Fringe medical historians note that chronic dehydration can induce hallucinations of water sources, mirages so vivid they trick the mind. You shake your head. Great, I'll be seeing swimming pools next. The corridor opens again, this time into a gallery of protruding rock shelves. On them rest bowls carved from volcanic glass, each containing residue of simmered lentils and barley porridge. You scramble forward, heart racing, only to find each bowl glazed over like a mirror solidified by enchantment. You run your palm across one feeling, the cold glass tasting the phantom warmth of a meal that never was. You gasp, backpedaling glass porridge. Talk about modern art gone wrong. Your pulse races as you circle the display. You sense movement behind a column and peer around. There's nothing there, yet something stirs your hunger into sharper focus. Maybe it's your own reflection in the bowls, staring back hollow-eyed. Fringe art critics claim some underworld exhibits were crafted by rogue spirits, seeking amusement planting illusions to torment visitors. You shudder. Even the decor is out to get me. Beyond the glass banquet, the path slopes downward. Each step seems heavier, as if your bones fight gravity to keep you upright. Hunger is no longer a complaint. It's a living entity gnawing at your essence. You clutch your abdomen, imagining ribs like iron bars pressing on your lungs. Modern nutritionists might diagnose you with an empty calorie deficit, but here, labels mean nothing. You're stripped to a primal need. A breeze wafts by, carrying a whiff of roasting meat, smoky, rich, utterly irresistible. Your head snaps to the source, but you only see a half-buried brazier glowing with embers that emit no heat. You lean forward, inhaling deeply, and taste blood in your mouth, yours. Maybe not, but the copper tang intensifies the panic. Fringe culinary historians suggest that this ghost smell came from ancient tombs where offerings of meat were interred. Over centuries, the scent seeped into the stone. You gag. I'd rather have a modern cheeseburger right now. Suddenly, a rhythmic clink echoes from deeper within like utensils against plates. You freeze, every nerve ablaze. Your mind conjures images, a phantom feast attended by lost souls, utensils scraping at empty bowls. The sound grows louder, clink, 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 then stops as abruptly as it began. Silence crashes in heavier than the heat. You swallow throat raw. Third joke. Guess they don't tip here either. You stumble toward the sound's origin, passing more seal-stamped pots and fractured amphorae. Each vessel feels more contemptuous than the last, a silent gallery of communal starvation. You pause at a wall, relief showing Hestia tending her hearth. A fringe detail suggests that lost souls huddled near her flame to warm hands and hearts, only to find the fire eternal and cold. You sigh, cold hearth, cold drinks, cold reception. Your chest heaves as you crest a rise into a small alcove lit by a single torch whose flame sputters. Beneath it sits an iron cauldron, legs sunk into the rock. Steam rises lazily, but you sense no heat. The steam carries a complex scent route, vegetables, wild herbs, and something smoky. You scour the ground for a ladle or spoon, anything to sample even a drop. You find a brittle wooden spoon pristine despite this domain's neglect. You dip it into the steam whisper and bring it to your lips. The vapors scorch the inside of your nostrils, leaving a charred aftertaste and no relief. You cough, stepping back, gourmet ash soup coming soon to a Michelin guide near you. Your laughter is hollow, like a cracked bell. You realize the humor is a shield. Without it, you might collapse. Hunger is now a storm in your guts, each twist a lightning strike. Your vision flutters, and you press both hands to your stomach, rocking gently like a child. A fringe healer once claimed that induced pain could lead to spiritual clarity, that affliction was the path to enlightenment. You snort, "If that's the case, I'll pass thanks." Your knees buckle, and you slump against the alcove's wall. The torchlight casts your shadow, long and lean, a gaunt silhouette etched on the rock. You feel yourself shrinking both in size and will. Behind you, the corridor stretches into darkness, the path forward, resisting your faltering resolve. You swallow the dryness in your throat, a hiss of betrayal. A solitary tear rolls down your cheek, saltier than any ocean, sharper than any blade. It evaporates mid-fall, leaving a prickle on your skin. In that instant, hunger transcends physicality. It becomes a relentless echo of desire itself, an ache that resonates in your mind, long after your body starves. You rise unsteadily, drawing on whatever scraps of determination you possess. You take a trembling breath and step away from the alcove, leaving behind the iron cauldron that promises sustenance but delivers only torment. The corridor slopes downward, still beckoning you onward. You cling to the promise, however faint that relief could lie ahead. A whisper of cool water, a glimmer of fruit, a moment's peace from the gnawing emptiness. One last glance over your shoulder, the alcove recedes in shadows, its torch guttering until only the faintest ember pulses. The seeds of hunger planted here will follow you through every twist and turn, a burden as constant as your heartbeat. You swallow throat raw and step forward into the darkness, guided by that echo of want that will not let you go. You slide into a torchlit alcove where the walls are plastered with faded scenes of poets and prophets, and the air smells of old parchment and melted wax, an evocative scent that draws you closer, as if each breath grants a whisper of ancient verse. Here, Tantalus's endless thirst becomes more than a cautionary spectacle. It is a symbol woven into the very fabric of classical literature. You probably won't survive this metacognitive dive unscathed, but hey, at least your thirst for knowledge is unquenchable. Your first encounter is with Homer's Odyssey, composed around the 8th century BCE, where Odysseus, journeying through the underworld in Book 11, pauses by a silvery pool to witness a figure forever tormented by unreachable water. Homer describes Tantalus standing in clear water that ebbs away the moment he stoops to drink, an image scholars still argue whether reflects Bronze Age ritual sites or purely poetic invention. Mainstream fact, Homer's epic solidified Tantalus as the archetype of tantalizing desire, and his name even became an English verb by the 14th century. You lean in to catch the hush of that ancient text, imagining the syllables rolling off your tongue, Tantalus echoing like a drumbeat in a grand hall. Fringe papyrologists claim a newly unearthed Oxyrhynchus fragment hints that Homer borrowed the motif from an even older Anatolian folktale about a local spring that mysteriously dried whenever villagers approached talk about an early Instagram filter for water. You smirk. Imagine geotagging that post. Jicker dry spring, here's epic fail. Next, you drift toward Ovid's Metamorphoses, penned in the 1st century CE, where Tantalus's plight is recast as part of a tapestry of transformations. Here, his crime and punishment become moral exempla in a universe governed by fickle gods. Ovid's lush Latin details the water's retreat with such theatrical flair that you almost taste the cold refusal on your lips. Historians still argue whether Ovid aimed to moralize Roman elites or simply delighted in gruesome spectacle. Either way, his version cemented the myth in Western imagination. You trace your fingers along a carved panel depicting Ovid's version Tantalus reaching for grapes that recoil like shy lovers. The grapes' painted rubies have faded, but you catch a shimmer of gold leaf where the artisan tried to capture divine allure. Fringe art historians speculate that this panel was once lacquered with a resin that made the fruit glint in torchlight, an early form of theatrical set design for mythic reenactments. You chuckle stagecraft in antiquity. Someone order the Dolby Atmos upgrade. Joke 1. A low breeze stirs, carrying a soft echo of chanting verse fragments of Euripides' lost tragedy, Tantalus, in which scholars still argue whether the play depicted the ritual murder of Pelops or treated it as allegory for political hubris. From what survives, you gather that the playwright dramatized Tantalus's fall to warn Athens against pride in its own imperial ambitions. You imagine masked actors stepping in time to a sorrowful refrain, wine cups trembling in their hands. Your eyes drift to a corner where a rosetted tile quotes Virgil's Aeneid Illa refugit imago. That ghostly form recoils, linking Tantalus to Aeneas's encounter with shadows in the Italian underworld. It's a mainstream fact that Virgil, writing in the 1st century BCE, borrowed Scipio's vision of the afterlife from Homeric precedent, blending Greek myth with Roman ideology. Historians still argue whether Virgil intended this homage or deemed it necessary to anchor Roman epic in venerable tradition. You sit on a chipped stone bench and let the murmur of these literary echoes settle into your bones. Fringe literary theorists propose that Dante's Divine Comedy borrowed Tantalus's image for the terrace of gluttony in Purgatorio, where souls suffer rains of excrement. They cannot catch an extension of the motif of tantalizing torment. You arch an eyebrow. Poetic justice upgraded to Dante's dark comedy. Talk about misery with extras. Joke 2. A faint drip echoes from somewhere deep, and you realize this gallery is alive with the same refrain of unreachable desire. The stone floor's moisture slick the air redolent of idea and irony. You breathe in, tasting ancient ink and dust, and feel a thrill. This is where myth becomes mirror reflecting human longing back on itself. You rise, tracing a path to a final niche where a fragment of Callimachus's hymn on Zeus mentions Tantalus's punishment as an example of divine law enforcing moral order. Callimachus, a 3rd century BCE scholar-poet, used the tale to contrast mortal impudence with divine justice. Historians still argue whether his hymns were dry academic exercises or popular performances accompanied by lyre and chorus. Fringe performers claim some recited his verses in underground mystery cults, mythological open mic nights perhaps. You grin, I'd pay to see that slam poetry. Joke 3. The alcove dims as the torches gutter and the echoes fade, but you carry with you the resonance of those classical voices. Tantalus's fate transcends its underworld setting to become a literary symbol of desires that elude fulfillment, an archetype that writers use to warn, entertain, and provoke introspection. You feel the whisper of those poets in your ear, urging you to remember that even the most enticing promise may vanish when you reach for it. You step away from the alcove, the parchment-scented air giving way to cooler stone corridors. The echo of dripping moisture follows a reminder that the story lives on in every cautious want you feel. Tantalus's legacy in literature is both a warning and a comfort. Our hungers connect us across time, but we need to learn which ones will always slip through our fingers. As you exit, the hush of pages turning in unseen hands accompanies you, and you sense that this symbol will haunt your dreams, perhaps a blessing, perhaps a burden. Yet you carry forward richer for the myth's echoes, even if you remain forever thirsty for more. You step into a vaulted hall where torchlight gives way to soft daylight, filtering through stained glass windows high above, and the scent of aged varnish mingles with cool marble underfoot. Here, the myth of Tantalus finds new life in the hands of Renaissance and Baroque masters, each brushstroke and chisel mark cementing his agony for posterity. You probably won't survive the art history onslaught without a glossary, but take heart, at least you can admire some fine paintings while you're eternally parched. On your left, Nicolas Poussin's The Punishment of Tantalus, c. 1648 dominates the wall. The French Baroque painter rendered the king's torment with stoic restraint. Tantalus stands waist-deep in dark water that melts away at his touch grapes dangling just above. Mainstream fact: Poussin's classical compositions heavily influenced European taste well into the 18th century, cementing mythological scenes as high art. Historians still argue whether Poussin intended this canvas as a moral exemplar of divine justice or primarily as a showcase of his mastery in depicting human anatomy. You lean closer, noting the precise rendering of muscle and sinew, then snap back, imagining museum guards scolding you for invasive study. Joke 1, excuse me, is this part of the interactive exhibit? Across from Poussin hangs a sweeping oil by Peter Paul Rubens, titled Tantalus Bound. Fringe rumor insists it exists in a private Luxembourg collection. You squint at the glossy surface, half expecting a secret signature beneath layers of red and gold. Fringe gossip claims Rubens painted this dramatic canvas after a particularly nasty gout attack, projecting his own throbbing joints into the king's eternal struggle. You smirk. Who knew punishment? Themed art came with built-in self-portraiture. Despite scant evidence, no museum catalog lists such a work. This whispered legend endows the painting with extra spice. Between these giants stands a modest marble relief attributed to a young Michelangelo discovered in the Casa Buonarroti archives in the 19th century. The relief shows Tantalus craning his neck toward water, every vein bulging. Mainstream fact: Michelangelo's early work often featured classical subjects drawn from antique sarcophagi sherds unearthed in Rome. Historians still argue whether this particular relief was an autograph by the master or a talented pupil's homage. You trail a fingertip along the marble's cool surface, then remember you're not allowed to touch museum pieces. Joke 2. Next time, I'll just buy the postcard. The gallery's center features a tapestry reproduction of Raphael's lost fresco, rumored to have adorned a Vatican corridor. Although the original perished in a fire, the tapestry depicts Tantalus amid a banquet table floating in mid-air olives and figs, hurling through space like cosmic confetti. Fringe art historians propose the tapestry's vibrant hues were achieved with crushed beetles and gold dust, an eye-watering combination that would make any conservationist blanch. You inhale the spicy sweet aroma of beet pigment in your imagination and shudder nature's palate meets insect rights violation. Moving on, you pass a Baroque oil by Luca Giordano showing Tantalus's shoulders trembling as water slithers away. The canvas pulses with theatrical motion, waves cresting branches, twisting muscles, tensing. Mainstream fact: Giordano was renowned for his rapid execution and vivid color, carrying Venetian drama to Naples's palaces. Historians still argue whether his frenetic style conveys genuine pathos or simply cacophonous spectacle. You lean in, captivated by the twisted limbs and foam-flecked water, then jerk back as a tour group shuffles past. Joke 3. Art theft is a breeze when everyone's busy taking selfies. Along the right wall, a small Venetian painting by Titian's workshop captures the moment Tantalus first sat at Zeus's table, a gilded goblet raised in reckless defiance. The figures bear Titian's hallmark, rich reds and velvety shadows, though connoisseurs debate how much of the work is genuine. Mainstream fact: Titian's workshop produced countless devotional and mythological canvases to meet Venetian demand, blurring lines between master and apprentice strokes. Historians still argue whether any surviving workshop pieces achieve the master's true quality or are mere echoes of his genius. You stand so close, you see individual pigment crystals, then recoil, noticing a slight cough from the docent behind you. In a corner alcove, a glass case houses a dozen preparatory sketches by artists from Botticelli to Carracci, each exploring the motif of unreachable fruit or receding water. One red chalk study attributed to Sandro Botticelli shows delicate hands reaching for grapes that vanish beneath the line, a visual pun on desire. Fringe scholars suggest Botticelli hid alchemical symbols in the fruit's arrangement, embedding secret codes about immortality in his lines. You tilt your head, marveling at the swirl of vines, then grin. Who knew pomegranates could be cryptographic? Your footsteps echo on polished oak as you approach a modern installation by a 21st century artist, a looped video projection of a hand reaching into a clear tank while water drains out in real time. Mainstream fact: contemporary artists frequently reinterpret classical myths to comment on consumerism and unending desire. Historians still argue whether such immersive artworks deepen engagement or reinvent myth into gimmick. Fringe critics rave that this installation doubles as an environmental statement on water scarcity, though ironically, the gallery mists the air to keep temperatures stable, secretly using gallons per minute. You chuckle museum eco-credentials withholding water for art's sake. As you pause beneath a chandelier shaped like olive branches, you sense the collective weight of centuries of interpretation pressing down. Each epoch remixes Tantalus's punishment to suit its own anxieties: Renaissance faith in classical antiquity, Baroque flair for drama, modern art's hunger for commentary. Open scholarly debate swirls around whether these representations elevate the myth's moral core or dilute it into spectacle. You lean back against a pedestal, imagining Tantalus himself as the world's first performance artist condemned to an eternal live act of desire. The hush of the gallery fades as you step toward the exit vestibule, where a final plaque summarizes the evolution. From Homer's verses to contemporary critique, Tantalus's torment remains an enduring mirror of human longing. You inhale the antiseptic scent of air vents and feel a pang of irony after wandering through vivid depictions of thirst and hunger. Here, the climate control stands as a gentle promise of constant comfort. You tuck that thought away, knowing it won't save you from your own desires. You step out onto a marble landing overlooking a courtyard where fountains trickle in simple arcs, each drop a whisper of mercy. You kneel at the balustrade and cup your hands, watching water catch in your palms before spilling away in arcs. The sunlight glints through droplets, evoking every painting you've just seen. But when you lift the water to your lips, it's always room temperature and willingly flows. Unlike Tantalus, you're free to drink. You smile wryly, raising the final toast to the endless parade of art that immortalized his suffering and your own momentary triumph. You step into a hushed chamber, lined with weathered codices and faded tapestries, the scent of aged vellum mingling with faint incense drifting from a brazen censer. Candlelight dances across miniature illuminations of knights and courtly love, each brushstroke whispering tales of longing that echo Tantalus's unfulfilled hunger. You probably won't survive this library of romance without feeling your own heart pinch, but at least you get a free history lesson, no overdue fines promise. In the 12th century, troubadours in Occitania roamed castles and courts, serenading noble patrons with verse of unattainable love, pain so acute it rivaled the king condemned to unquenchable thirst. A mainstream fact by 1150 CE figures like Bernard de Ventadorn had perfected the canso lyrical songs that painted desire as a sweet torment, echoing Tantalus's plight in medieval vernacular. Historians still argue whether these troubadour themes evolved directly from classical sources or emerged independently from feudal courtship rituals. You smirk. Imagine writing breakup ballads for lords who could hang you for insulting their wife. That's poetic license taken literally. Joke 1. You lean in to study an illuminated page showing a courtly lady seated under a lemon tree, her gaze fixed on a distant horizon. Fringe paleographers claim the lemon motif here symbolizes Tantalus's citrus-laced torment, introduced by crusaders returning with exotic fruits, an odd fusion of biblical garden and underworld myth. You wrinkle your nose at the thought of lemons in a dusty 13th century scriptorium. Zest for life, more like zest for endless suffering. Joke 2. A low chant drifts from a corner where a modern scholar recites troubadour lyrics in Occitan. Lines evoke a lover's pain so intense, he compares each withheld glance to water that recedes when he reaches out an almost literal translation of Tantalus's agony. You close your eyes, imagining the troubadour's lute chords quivering like fingertips on water's surface. Historians still argue whether these refrains were meant for public performance or as secret devotional texts for aristocratic circles hidden behind velvet curtains. Beyond the troubadour corner, richly embroidered tapestries depict scenes from Chrétien de Troyes' romances. A knight on horseback reaches toward a floating chalice, its ribbon of wine extending and retracting as if controlled by an unseen hand. Fringe textile experts whisper that some workshops hid mechanical threads in the weave, causing slight motion when wind passed through window slits, an early animatronic feature that would terrify modern Disney Imagineers. You chuckle. Talk about immersive attraction pending code compliance. Joke 3. You trace your fingertip along a verse inscribed in Gothic script, Liqueur soffres de sete et marida d'amour, literally the heart suffers thirst and is married to love. The physical grooves of each letter feel like etched scars of centuries-old yearnings. Mainstream scholarship notes that medieval manuscripts often glossed classical myths with Christian allegory transforming Tantalus's punishment into spiritual lessons on sin and penance. Historians still argue whether scribes regarded these insertions as theological necessity or creative embellishment. A soft breeze stirs pages of a psalter left open on a lectern as if beckoning you forward. The margin shows a tiny sketch, an inverted tree with fruit perpetually just beyond a tiny figure's reach. Fringe codicologists propose this doodle was an anonymous monk's private protest against strict fasting rules, a cheeky nod to Tantalus in a life of enforced abstinence. You grin at the medieval meme, Monk Gripes Eternal Fasting Edition. You slide a stool forward and sit beneath an archway of carved stone, the cool marble pressing through your breeches. Your ears pick up the distant drone of Gregorian chant, mingling with the rustle of vellum. A unicorn emblem on a nearby tapestry seems to shimmer in the candle glow, its horn pointing skyward like an impossible fruit. You inhale the heady aroma of melted beeswax wood smoke and ink, an intoxicating fragrance that feels like nostalgia for an era you never lived. From troubadours, you move to romantic bards of the 19th century. Lord Byron, in his 1813 epic Childe Harold's Pilgrimage, likened unrequited passion to standing on the brink of paradise, only for a tempest to snatch the horizon away. Mainstream fact, Byron's brooding portrayals of desire and despair sparked a pan-European phenomenon influencing poets from Keats to Pushkin. Historians still argue whether Byron's invocation of classical motifs was genuine homage or a fashionable affectation to bolster his celebrity brand. You pore over a first edition of Percy Shelley's Prometheus Unbound, where Shelley reimagines Tantalus's torment as a fight against cosmic oppression, casting the eternal thirster as a rebel more than a sinner. Fringe literary theorists argue that Shelley coded his disdain for monarchical tyranny in the myth positioning Tantalus as proto-revolutionary. You tilt your head at the idea of a punk rock progenitor in Muleskin's Tantalus godforsaken anarchist coming soon to your local salon. Nearby, John Keats's Ode to a Nightingale lies open, its lines shimmering. My heart aches, and a drowsy numbness pains my sense. You sense the echoes of Tantalus's yearning in Keats's own intoxicated longing for oblivion. Mainstream critics note Keats's fascination with Greek myth as a gateway to explore human mortality and desire. Historians still argue whether Keats's mythic allusions were learned elegance or emotional necessity. A delicate quiver runs down your spine as you study a framed sonnet by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. Here, the heart's boundless thirst rivets into uncounted enumerations, each line a plea for more. Fringe Browning enthusiasts speculate she referenced Tantalus overtly in marginalia, crossing out lines that threaten to reveal too much of her clandestine passion. You smirk, marginalia subtext lovers edition. Candles gutter in wall sconces, casting elongated shadows across the room. You rise and pace each step, stirring flecks of pigment on the floor, traces of ultramarine once ground from lapis lazuli treasure of papal commissions. The corridor narrows into a vaulted archway, leading toward a small alcove where T.S. Eliot's modernist allusion awaits. Eliot, in The Waste Land, cites the myth obliquely, "You gave me, hyacinth girl," weaving classical despair into post-World War I disillusion. Mainstream scholars consider Eliot's references integral to his collage of cultural decay. Historians still argue whether he intended readers to link these fragments back to Tantalus or to cast a broader net of classical ruin. You pause before a sleek display of artifacts, an illustrated edition of Sylvia Plath's early poems, where her speaker laments a drying well of affection. Fringe feminist critics argue that Plath's invocation of scarcity upends Tantalus's male-dominated narrative, reframing it as feminine experience of emotional withholding. You press a finger to the cool glass. If only it were a one-way mirror, I'd see my relief on the other side. A distant echo of dripping water reaches you, the same mournful cadence you've followed since the pool, reminding you that literature is a river of desire, eternally receding when you reach for fulfillment. You lean back against a carved pillar, feeling its weight support you like a steadfast friend. Candlelight flickers one last time before dimming, and you sense the manuscripts themselves settle into contemplative hush. You step out into a narrower passage, the scent of parchment giving way to cooler stone. The echo of quills scratching on vellum fades, and the drip, drip, drip follows as a literary heartbeat, a reminder that stories of longing persist because desire itself is unending. You carry in your chest the verses and visions of centuries, each echo a shard of what it means to want. You step onto a neon-lit city street at night, the hum of traffic blending with the glow of smartphone screens and digital billboards, and unexpectedly, you feel the ancient tug of Tantalus's torment woven into the fabric of modern culture. You probably won't survive this scroll through pop culture without a data plan, but at least your thirst for nostalgia is momentarily sated. In film and television, Tantalus's eternal tease appears in surprising cameos. Mainstream fact in the Coen brothers' 2000 film, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, the Blind Railroad Prophet, references a fate like Old Tantalus, evoking the myth to underscore the character's fruitless quests. Historians still argue whether this nod betrays a sincere grasp of classical allusion or simply functions as a clever Easter egg for literate viewers. Fringe cinephiles claim that a deleted scene in The Matrix once featured Neo reaching for a digital drop of code that dissolved before he could touch it, a direct homage to Tantalus, though no official scripts corroborate it. You smirk glitch in The Matrix more like dripping irony. Joke 1. Walking past a neon sign that reads all-you-can-eat buffet, you wince at the irony. Modern abundance mocking ancient starvation. The phrase tantalize has bled into everyday language so seamlessly that you probably used it yesterday without thinking. Mainstream fact English borrowed tantalize from Latin tantalizo in the late 16th century, cementing Tantalus's legacy in the lexicon of temptation. Historians still argue whether this semantic shift reflects genuine moral caution or was simply a lexical convenience for Renaissance scholars. Fringe etymologists propose that the word's roots carry echoes of an old Anatolian term for mirage, suggesting that speakers centuries ago unconsciously preserved the myth's original locale in their vocabulary. You chuckle tantalize or tantalize, it's all a linguistic dance. Joke 2. A brisk wind carries the neon reflection onto your face as you pass an advertisement for a new thirst-quenching soda, complete with CGI drops that recoil from an on-screen tongue. You watch fascinated and horrified as the drop vanishes mid-air. You lean in to catch a hint of citrus, but the cool air smells only of exhaust and ozone. Fringe marketing analysts suggest that some ad agencies intentionally evoke the Tantalus effect to make products seem more desirable, manipulating consumer desire through mythic psychology. Historians still argue whether such tactics are ethical or simply the latest evolution of ancient persuasion techniques. You mutter Mythic Marketing 101, tease first, sell later. Joke 3. In literature, the myth pops up in everything from dystopian novels to self-help parables. You spot a flyer plastered on a lamppost promoting a new thriller titled Tantalus Protocol, promising readers a plot where every revelation slips through your grasp. You tear your eyes away, blinking at the glare of oncoming headlights. Mainstream fact modern fantasy authors like Rick Riordan have reintroduced Greek myths to young audiences, with Tantalus appearing as a minor antagonist in the Percy Jackson series. Historians still argue whether these YA adaptations dilute the original moral complexities or spark a genuine interest in antiquity. Fringe fan theories even suggest that Riordan encoded secret puzzles in his novels, leading eagle-eyed readers to real-world quest sites where they can collect golden apples and ORG that blends myth with tourism. You groan. Nothing like chasing fruit in a corn maze of breadcrumbs. Across the street, a mural sprawls over a brick wall. A giant figure stands waist-deep in pixelated water, clutching at a floating smartphone. You pause, mesmerized by the fusion of ancient myth and modern addiction. A local street artist using the tag Tantalost spray-painted it overnight, claiming art can resurrect old gods in urban jungles. Fringe art critics hail this as a poignant commentary on screen addiction, where notifications drip just out of reach. Historians still argue whether street art can be considered a legitimate extension of mythic storytelling or is merely ephemeral graffiti. You snap a photo for your feed, then sigh as the image compresses into an indistinct thumbnail. You wander into a retro arcade where the flicker of CRT monitors and bleeping sounds of pinball machines fill your ears. A game titled Tantalus Quest invites players to guide a pixelated hero through levels of fountains and orchards, collecting coins that disappear as you touch them. You insert a token and press start. The hero's sprite pauses at the edge of a pool, the water rippling before receding. You mash the joystick in frustration, yet the animation loops back endlessly. Mainstream fact indie game developers have revived ancient myths in pixel art form, building small communities around myth-themed gameplay. Historians still argue whether interactive media deepens audience engagement with classical stories or trivializes them through gamification. Fringe coders claim the source code contains hidden commentary on Plato's cave allegory, an inside joke only legible in hex. You chuckle. When philosophy meets 8-bit, even the cave feels pixelated. Leaving the arcade, you catch a whiff of cinnamon from a nearby bakery. A sign advertises Tantalus tartlets. So good, you'll crave more. Each pastry adorned with a glossy sugar glaze that catches the light. You eye the display, recalling every unreachable drop of water and every dangling pomegranate. Despite the promise, you know the tartlets won't vanish when you bite them, but the myth's shadow makes you pause. Is it hunger, or is it the echo of 1,000 unmet desires? You reach for your wallet, reminding yourself that some cravings are meant to be indulged. In music, Tantalus's ring reverberates through lyrics and album art. A passing song on a cafe speaker croons, "Tease me, please me, let me reach the flame," and you wince at the tagline's resemblance to the mythic pattern. Mainstream fact rock bands from the 1970s onwards, including Led Zeppelin, referenced Greek myths to add mystique to their work. Historians still argue whether such lyrical nods enriched rock's poetic depth or served simply as a branding device. Fringe musicologists insist that a rare vinyl pressing by an obscure 80s new wave band titled Tantalus's Mirror contains subliminal beats that mirror the frequency of a human heartbeat, an experiment in mythic resonance. You tap your foot, half convinced you feel your pulse sync with the rhythm. You step into a bookstore and the latest self-help aisle beckons, filled with titles like Escape Your Personal Tartarus and Quench That Inner Thirst. You pick up a glossy hardcover promising secrets to fulfillment. Its back cover copy speaks of chasing dreams without letting desire slip away. You flip to the acknowledgments and spot a nod to the myth for reminding me what true longing feels like. You tuck it under your arm, thinking that maybe some lessons need reframing for the modern age. Historians still argue whether self-help reframes myths productively or flattens their moral complexity into quick-fix slogans. Fringe psychologists suggest that myth-based therapy could harness Tantalus's tale to treat addiction to unattainable goals, a sort of stoic exposure therapy. You half worry next session involves endless unmet goals. Fun. Stepping back outside, the night has deepened, and the buzz of neon fades into the rumble of an approaching subway. You descend the stairs into the tunnel where graffiti tags and flickering lights set a pulse of urban life. The walls here are plastered with stickers for late-night poetry slams and thirst trap art shows titles seemingly wink at Tantalus's eternal state. You realize the myth has seeped into collective consciousness, morphing into a versatile metaphor for anything just beyond reach: love, success, clarity of mind, or even the next level in a game. As the train rumbles in, you lean against a pillar painted with a mural of a figure reaching through a screen, trying to touch a streaming heart icon that drifts away. You tap your phone to activate mobile payment, watching the transaction ripple and complete. You lift your gaze to meet your own reflection in the darkened window, eyes wide, lips parted, hunger in your expression. You probably won't survive the next hour-long commute without thinking of Tantalus's legacy, but at least you have a story to carry with you. The train whooshes to a stop, doors hiss open, and you step aboard, each drip of water from the tunnel ceiling echoing in your mind. You settle into a plastic seat, your reflection framed by the carriage's harsh overhead light. You feel the myth's current pull at you, a whisper in every unmet desire, a shadow behind each temptation. You close your eyes as the train lurches forward, the rhythmic clatter of wheels on track, serving as a modern recitation of that ancient drip, drip, drip. You slip through a narrow archway carved with swirling serpents, their scales etched in fading relief, and find yourself amid a circular chamber whose walls are covered in layered frescoes, each one a variant of Tantalus's tale. Here, myth and history blur, and you stand at the crossroads of origin stories that have tangled scholars for centuries. You probably won't emerge with a definitive answer, but you'll at least witness the universe's most epic game of which version is real. In one fresco, Tantalus is a Lydian king punished for revealing divine secrets to mortal foes. In another, he's a Phrygian noble whose crime is a ritual transgression. Mainstream fact: the earliest extant Greek source, Hesiod's Theogony, circa 700 BCE, simply mentions Tantalus among the damned without detailing his crime, suggesting the full tale coalesced later. Historians still argue whether the myth was originally an Anatolian folk legend appropriated by Greek poets or a purely Hellenic invention to moralize hubris. You trace your finger along a faded winged inscription, an 8th century BCE Greek letter that seems to wink at you. Pick me. A shaded alcove displays fragments of regional variants. In one, Tantalus offends the Phrygian goddess Cybele by overharvesting mountain fruits, a cautionary note on ecological balance. Fringe tidbits: some fringe folklorists insist the story began as an earth spirit myth, explaining why certain springs dry up in summer. Ancient villagers allegedly blamed the god's anger when wells went empty. You smirk. My local water utility could take notes. Joke 1. Another panel depicts Tantalus as a sacrificial victim, an annual scapegoat in Bronze Age Anatolia, whose death supposedly ensured agricultural fertility. A mainstream fact: ancient Near Eastern cultures like the Hittites, circa 1600–1158 BCE, practiced ritual offerings of animals and occasionally humans, which might have inspired Greek tales of divine retribution. Historians still argue whether such sacrificial rites directly influenced the Tantalus legend, or if later storytellers grafted those elements onto an existing cautionary fable. You shrug. Either way, it's a gruesome way to guarantee a good olive harvest. Joke 2. You step closer to a mosaic showing Tantalus reaching for pomegranates over a mirror-smooth pool, the pool's water retreated by the breath of a stealthy wind spirit painted at the edge. Fringe scholars claim this wind spirit named Animos was a local demon, later excised by pan-Hellenic poets who preferred jealous gods to mischievous sprites. You chuckle. Imagine editing your myth for mass appeal. Next up, no dragons for the YA crowd. Joke 3. Above these variants, a digital projection flickers an interactive timeline, marking textual references from Hesiod through Pindar, Ovid, and into the Byzantine Scholia. You tap the glass to pause at a 5th century BCE scholium that questions why Pelops would voluntarily return to life after being boiled, an early footnote, puzzling that sounds suspiciously like a modern editor's note. Seriously, what was he thinking? Historians still argue whether this scholium captures genuine ancient doubt or later scribal humor. You grin, even antiquity had its snarky commentators. In the center of the room stands a pedestal topped by a cracked amphora, its surface painted with a version of the myth in archaic script. You peer at the looping letters and recognize a dialect shift. This potter's inscription uses Lydian Greek hybrid words. Mainstream fact: bilingual inscriptions appear in Western Anatolia around the 6th century BCE, reflecting cultural exchange. Historians still argue whether that region's unique linguistic mix gave birth to the Tantalus myth before it migrated into canonical Greek. You pat the amphora, you might be the OG mythmaker. Between fresco and fragment, you find a small niche where a modern scholar has projected an augmented reality overlay, highlighting parallels with Near Eastern stories of Atrahasis and Etana figures, who also suffered as a test of divine favor. Fringe comparative mythologists claim that virtually every culture has a thirst punishment tale. One from ancient Sumerian clay tablets mentions a king punished by a receding Euphrates River. You wonder if the myth-sharing network back then had better download speeds. A gentle hum washes through the chamber as you approach a circular bench. You sit absorbing pigeonholed theories. Some academics stress a moralizing function, punishing greed and overreach, while others emphasize agricultural metaphors about seasonal drought and fruiting cycles. Historians still argue whether the core message was religious, ecological, or purely psychological, a caution against chasing unattainable desires. You lean back, feeling the weight of academic ambivalence pinning you like Zeus's thunderbolt. On the bench's edge, carved in tiny letters, is a reminder: remember the drip, drip, drip. It's a callback to every pool you've encountered, every pomegranate tree you've chased, that rhythmic metronome of longing. You close your eyes and hear it again, soft as a lullaby, the world's oldest ASMR track playing for an audience of exactly one you. You rise and wander toward a display of numismatic evidence, ancient coins bearing Tantalus's face on one side and a receding tide on the other. Mainstream fact: some cities in Lydia minted local coins in the 5th century BCE featuring mythic figures to assert civic identity. Historians still argue whether towns with Tantalus iconography worshipped him as a cautionary hero or merely used his image for political branding. You pocket an imaginary coin for purchasing moral lessons. A final corridor leads you past a mirrored wall. As you press your palm against the reflective surface, your reflection warps. Your hand seems to meet the water behind the glass, yet the image recedes. It's a perfect encapsulation of your entire journey. You yearn for meaning, but every attempt to grasp a single truth slides away into debate. Fringe philosophers posit that the myth's multiplicity is its point. Desire itself is inherently fractal, always revealing deeper layers. You exhale Existentialism Ancient Edition. You step back into the antechamber where the frescoes blend and flicker. The cacophony of versions, debates, and theories settles into a harmony of uncertainty. You carry this chorus in your mind. Was it hubris? Was it ecological allegory? Was it political commentary? Historians still argue whether Tantalus's original sin was betrayal, sacrilege, or simply being too thirsty. You walk toward the chamber's exit, the frescoes dissolving behind you like the water in every pool you sought. The corridor beyond stretches into dim light, and you feel the myth's ambiguity settle into your bones, an unanswered question shaped like a chalice. You know that, like Tantalus's torment, some mysteries are meant to endure, reminding you that seeking answers can be as enduring as the thirst itself. As you leave, the last echo you hear is not water receding, but the whispered phrase, "Stay curious, never sated." You smile at the paradox and step into the next passage, your thirst for knowledge both whetted and infinitely thwarted. You step into a circular chamber where the walls are draped with velvet tapestries, their deep crimson hues absorbing the flicker of torchlight and the scent of aged leather. A low hum of ambient sound wraps around you, soft chimes plucked from invisible harps, inviting you to explore the hidden corridors of your own mind. Here, Tantalus's torment transforms from physical punishment into a mirror of your psychological depths. You probably won't survive this therapy session without a tissue box, but at least your soul gets a workout. In the center, a pedestal supports a bronze sculptural brain segmented into lobes, each etched with scenes of drought and desire. Mainstream psychology traces the myth's resonance to Carl Jung's concept of the archetype, suggesting that Tantalus embodies the shadow side of desire, the part of the self that persists in yearning even when satisfaction lies within reach. Jungian analysts still argue whether myths like Tantalus's offer genuine pathways to self-discovery or merely reinforce cultural cliches. You lean in to trace the grooves. The frontal lobe shows hands reaching for grapes, the temporal lobe drips a smooth pool, and the parietal lobe trembles with etched water ripples. You whisper, "Who knew brain scans could be so mythological?" Joke 1. A soft breeze carries the scent of citrus blossom and ozone, a sensory callback to the pomegranate tree and dripping pool you left behind. It teases at your nostrils, triggering memories of those unreachable fruits and the sting of receding water. You inhale deeply, feeling your pulse quicken as desire simmers in your veins. Fringe neuroscientists propose that Tantalus's torment parallels the brain's dopamine pathways. The neurotransmitter spikes at the promise of reward, then crashes into frustration when the reward evaporates. They dub it the Tantalus loop, a cruel clickbait cycle written into your neurochemistry. You smirk, "My brain's on autoplay for disappointment. No subscription needed." Joke 2. On one wall, a montage of ink sketches illustrates various therapeutic approaches, a couch flanked by potted plants, a Rorschach ink blot shaped suspiciously like a dripping well, and a labyrinth walkway, your own soul's GPS gone haywire. Mainstream fact: modern cognitive behavioral therapy often uses metaphorical exposure to confront unattainable desires, helping patients break cycles of craving by reframing their relationship to want. Therapists still argue whether myth-based metaphors enhance treatment efficacy or distract from evidence-based techniques. You glance at the Rorschach blot and half expect your own reflection to emerge, furrowed brow and all. Beneath the sketches, a leather-bound tome lies open on a lectern Sigmund Freud's interpretation of dreams. His analysis of dreams, replete with receding oceans and unreachable fruit, lent early psychoanalysis a mythic framework for understanding subconscious drives. Freud's followers still argue whether his mythic readings reveal universal truths or overreach into fanciful speculation. You flip a page and spot Freud's handwritten note, "Desire unfulfilled may manifest as suffocating heat in nightmares." You fold your finger in to mark the spot, because who doesn't love marginalia from a founder? Joke 3. The chamber's floor is a mosaic of interlocking gears and vines combining mechanical precision with organic chaos. You step gingerly, noting that each step triggers a soft click, underfoot gears turning like clockwork vines weaving between sprockets. A plaque explains that this fusion symbolizes the interplay of rational thought and primal craving. Mainstream scholars in neuropsychiatry still argue whether human behavior is driven more by cognitive control or by evolutionary impulses coded in our genomes. Fringe biohackers assert that wearable tech could one day monitor your Tantalus threshold, warning you before dopamine dips into despair. You'd roll your eyes, but your smartwatch already buzzes you hourly with hydration reminders. Kind of ironic, isn't it? In a recessed niche, an antique mirror framed with tarnished silver reflects your silhouette. Etched at the bottom are the words, "Know thyself, know thy thirst." You lean closer, noticing droplets of condensation not on the glass, but seemingly suspended in front of it, each one a tiny perfect sphere caught in midair. As you watch, one droplet slides slowly downward, then vanishes before reaching the floor, leaving only a faint shimmer. You blink, heart skipping. It's the world's smallest reenactment of Tantalus's pool. You trace your fingers over the glass, half expecting to feel moisture. Instead, your palm meets only cool metal. Above the mirror, a projector casts quotes from modern thinkers. "Desire isn't a beast to be slain, but a river to be navigated." Contemporary psychologist, "Our dreams betray us. They chase promises that never were." Poet laureate. Psychologists still argue whether such poetic framings aid introspection or merely romanticize struggle. You whisper, "Guess it depends how much you like your metaphors served rare or well done." Toward the eastern wall, a soft focus painting shows a figure kneeling beneath a waterfall that alternates between rushing torrents and bone-dry emptiness. The artist used thermochromic paint so that body heat makes water appear only where you stand, a tactile homage to Tantalus's shifting water. Fringe art therapists use similar installations to provoke patients' awareness of their own shifting needs. Though some complain, the novelty wears off after the first session, and you're left with chilly walls. You wrap your arms around yourself. Freezing for insight, is that covered by insurance? Near a carved wooden bench, cushions embroidered with Ouroboros snakes invite you to sit. As you settle in, the bench vibrates lightly, a built-in massager designed to simulate the tremors of both anticipation and denial. You close your eyes, letting the gentle buzz coax your muscles even as your mind buzzes with unmet wants. A plaque notes, in moments of agitation, this vibration helps anchor the present. Therapists still argue whether physical stimuli like this can ground anxious minds or simply distract from deeper issues. You grin. "I always wanted a massage from Hades, though I'd prefer not to leave with eternal thirst." Across from the bench, a translucent curtain veils a hidden alcove. You part it to find a small fountain, its basin carved from obsidian. Water drips steadily from a single spout. You step closer, leaning in to drink, but as your lips near the surface, the spout stops, and the water retreats into the fountain's depths. A soft click echoes, and the drip resumes from a new spout behind you. You spin around too late, the water recedes again, leaving you parched and mystified. It's the chamber's final echo of Tantalus's fate, mechanized for maximum psychological effect. You gasp, tasting phantom moisture on your tongue. You straighten up, heart racing, and realize you're standing before a small desk with a journal labeled Reflections on Desire. A pen lies beside it. You pick it up, feeling the weight of its promise to record the yearnings that swirl in your mind, naming them so they lose power over you. Mainstream therapists often recommend journaling as a tool to externalize cravings, reducing their emotional charge. Scholars still argue whether this technique offers lasting change or merely relocates desire onto paper. Fringe self-help gurus market mythic journaling workshops, guiding participants to write under moonlight, to dance with eternal archetypes. You chuckle moonlit write-ins, just what my insomnia needed. You lower yourself into a leather chair opposite the desk. The cushions cradle you like a parent's embrace, and the room's hush invites introspection. You uncross your legs, uncurl your fingers, and begin to write. As the words flow, hopes, cravings, fears, you notice the dripping fountain softens its pattern as if acknowledging your act of naming. The discomfort recedes a fraction, offering a momentary glimmer of relief. You realize the myth isn't just a cosmic joke. It's a tool reflecting the tension between yearning and acceptance. Rising from the chair, you feel lighter, still aware of your desires, but no longer pummeling you unrelentingly. The chamber's soft chime fades as you approach the exit arch, its keystone carved with the image of a chalice half full. You step out into cooler stone corridors, a gentle breeze greeting you as if congratulating your progress. Behind you, the bronze brain sculpture and drip loop fountain remain waiting for the next visitor to wrestle with their inner thirst. You carry with you the sense that while some desires may always lie beyond reach, naming and confronting them can transform torment into mindful awareness. And as you walk on, you feel the myth's echo settle into your bones, that the truest journey isn't to slake every need, but to understand which ones guide you toward growth and which ones, like Tantalus's pool, invite endless loops of longing. You emerge into a sunlit glade suspended above a misty river, the scent of damp earth and wildflowers mingling with a faint tang of salt from memory. And here you find the echoes of Tantalus's original sin reverberating through his bloodline. You probably won't survive this family reunion without a therapist on speed dial, but at least the countryside is pretty. Before you stands a weathered tombstone half shattered by time. It bears the name Pelops, etched in ancient Greek letters chipped by centuries of wind. Pelops, Tantalus' son, survived the horrific feast reborn, whole through divine intervention, save for his missing shoulder replaced by an ivory prosthetic. A mainstream fact, according to Pindar's Olympian Odes 5th century BCE, Pelops raced King Oenomaus in a chariot contest to win the hand of Hippodamia. His ivory shoulder, a constant reminder of mortality's vulnerability. Historians still argue whether Pelops's chariot race myth symbolized political alliances in ancient Elis or was purely a dramatic invention by early poets. You kneel by the tomb, brushing loose moss from the marble. The grass beneath your fingertips feels surprisingly soft, like the plush upholstery of a modern cinema seat, except without the overpriced popcorn. A fringe detail insists that Pelops's ivory shoulder carried a hidden curse. Anyone who touched it would be smitten by unrequited love. You shiver imagining awkward first dates ruined by haunted prosthetics. Oh, you have a lovely smile, but I feel infinitely thirsty. Joke 1. Above Pelops' tomb, a low stone bench invites you to sit. You perch there and sigh, feeling the gentle warmth of the glade soothe your shoulders. Underfoot, tiny daisies nod in a breeze that carries distant bird calls, almost like lullabies for the weary. You lean back, eyes tracing the twisted roots of an old olive tree roots that legend says sprang from the tears of Niobe, Tantalus' daughter, who boasted of her children's beauty and incurred Leto's wrath. By the tree's base, you notice a bronze plaque showing Niobe's fate, her children slain by Apollo, and Artemis's arrows, her body turned to stone, weeping eternally. Mainstream sources record this myth in Ovid's Metamorphoses, 8 CE, where Niobe's tears flood her stony form until her children's ghosts comfort her in the underworld. Historians still argue whether Niobe's petrification reflects ancient cultural taboos against maternal pride or served as a cautionary tale about respecting local deities. You stand and touch the bark, its surface cool and ridged. A fringe rumor claims that on moonlit nights, you can hear the faint sobs of Niobe carried on the wind, an ASMR track for grief-stricken deities. You roll your eyes, recording that would definitely rack up plays on every streaming service. Joke 2. Nearby, a marble relief depicts another tragic descendant, Tantalus's granddaughter, Astyoche, who unwittingly caused a war by abducting a golden lamb. The relief's worn edges show faint traces of vermilion, as though an ancient painter once tried to capture her blush of shame. Fringe art historians suggest this piece was originally colored with cinnabar, the same pigment Michelangelo coveted, linking family tragedy to Renaissance vanity. You quip silently. Who knew sacrificial lambs came with a side of fashion commentary? Joke 3. The glade's sunlight shifts as clouds pass overhead, casting dancing shadows that seem to reenact the family saga in silhouette. You shiver, despite the warmth, sensing the weight of lineage pressing down like Atlas's burden. The air tastes slightly metallic, an echo of ivory shoulder of blood spilt by divine decree. You wander to a small fountain fed by a hidden spring, its water surprisingly clear and willing to flow. It's your first tangible relief since the underworld, a reprieve from unattainable desires. You cup your hands, drink deeply, and let the cool liquid soothe your parched throat. A fringe myth claims this spring marks the spot where Demeter wept for Persephone, blending maternal grief across 2 generations of divine-related sorrow. You swallow gratefully. I'll take any family drama that ends with hydration. Refreshed, you follow a narrow path toward a grassy knoll crowned by a solitary column. Atop it perches a bronze raven head, cocked as if to gossip. Under its base, an inscription tells of Broteas, another son of Tantalus who scorned Artemis and was driven mad before immolating himself. Mainstream scholarship notes that Broteas appears in Homeric hymns, only briefly suggesting his myth was a local cult story later scribbled into epic margins. Historians still argue whether Broteas represents a caution against disrespecting the wild goddess or a fragment of lost pre-Hellenic ritual. You glance skyward at the raven, its beady eyes gleaming in midday light. Fringe entomologists, rather ornithologists, speculate ravens appear at sites of ancient suicides to feed on tortured souls, as though nature recycles tragedy into its food web. You shake your head, ravens nature's own paparazzi chronicling every implosion. A breeze lifts petals from nearby flowers, drifting them across the grass like confetti at a gloomier birthday party. You step forward, bumping into a low hedge encircling the hilltop. The hedge's leaves are thick and glossy, their fragrance green and sweet. You remember that in some versions Pelops's bones were preserved in the temple of Zeus at Olympia, honored as relics. Mainstream archaeology confirms a tomb attributed to Pelops stood in Olympia until Roman times a site for ceremonial offerings. Historians still argue whether that tomb was truly his burial mound or simply a symbolic cenotaph erected for visitors' reverence. You lean in to smell the hedge's blooms like honeysuckle with a faint woody aftertaste and think about how families passed down curses like heirlooms, Pelops's ivory shoulder, Niobe's tears, Broteas's madness. It's an inheritance nobody would want. Yet the olive tree here thrives, its branches heavy with fruit. The irony isn't lost on you. From the bloodline of famine and thirst springs the symbol of peace and plenty. You pluck a single olive chew contemplatively and savor the firm flesh. The taste is earthy pungent, a reminder that growth can emerge from tragedy. From the knoll, you spot a distant ruin segmented into half-collapsed columns. As you walk toward it, the sunlight dims, leaves rustling like distant applause. Each step feels like tracing the family's steps, joy, hubris, vengeance, grief etched across generations. You reach the ruin. A circular pedestal once supported a statue of Tantalus himself, now reduced to a broken base. A single engraved word remains nearly worn away, hybris. You run a fingertip across the word feeling, the indentations like Braille for pride. Fringe epigraphers propose that ancient stonemasons intentionally placed that single warning at the family seat, an early version of billboard advertising moral lessons. You chuckle. Next time, spell it with more consonants so people won't need a tutorial. As you stand in the ruin, a shaft of sunlight pierces the clouds, illuminating the pedestal's cracked surface. You almost expect a beam of divine approval, but instead, you feel the wind whisper, "Remember the roots." It's a gentle nudge, your final takeaway from the family saga. For beneath every mythic torment lies a caution. The sins of the father echo, but so do the possibilities of renewal. You turn and descend the hill, olive branches brushing your shoulders, petals scattering at your feet. The glade behind you seems to sigh, as though at last the cycle of tragedy and remembrance finds a momentary pause. You carry with you the weight of the Tantalid lineage, the ache of unmet desires, the sting of ancestral grief, and the hope that even cursed blood can bear fruit. Below, the misty river flows steadily, offering you another chance at quenching your thirst, not just for water, but for understanding. You pause, glance back at the knoll's solitary column, and raven, and nod in silent gratitude. Then you step forward, the scent of wildflowers trailing behind, toward the next chapter of this mythic pilgrimage. You ascend a narrow flight of damp stone steps, each one slick from underground springs, and emerge into a vast hall lined with iconography from diverse religious traditions. The air is redolent of incense, frankincense, myrrh, sandalwood, each swirl of smoke seeming to form phantom droplets that vanish before your eyes, an olfactory echo of Tantalus's eternal teas. You probably won't survive this pilgrimage of comparative theology without catching a whiff of holiness-induced hysteria, but at least your sinuses are in for a treat. On your right, a large mosaic depicts the Islamic narrative of Qarun Korah, a figure in the Quran condemned to sink into the earth with all his wealth when he boasts of his riches. Mainstream fact, the story appears in Surah Al-Qasas 28:76-82, where Qarun's pride and refusal to give charity lead to divine retribution. Scholars still argue whether this narrative served primarily as a socio-economic warning against hoarding or as a broader lesson on humility. You lean closer, noting Qarun's jeweled belt legend says it held enough gold to fill a river, dazzling but doomed. Joke 1. Talk about a belt that doubles as a sinkhole. Across the hall, an illuminated Tibetan thangka shows King Langdharma cursed with insatiable thirst by Buddhist monks for persecuting their faith. His skin cracks like parched earth, and a lotus pool before him recedes whenever he kneels. Mainstream fact, Langdharma ruled in the 9th century CE. Buddhist chronicles report his antagonism led to a ritual censure, though some historians still argue whether the thirst motif is original or a later embellishment by sectarian scribes. Fringe anthropologists claim the lotus pool's petals once tinted the monks' robes, pink symbolizing compassion, withheld a poetic flourish, if true. You smirk, pink robes, pale souls fashion warning included. Adjacent, a Hindu mural portrays King Harishchandra, famed for honesty, who suffers famine and thirst after losing his kingdom and family. He stands by a supposedly endless vat of water that evaporates under the sun's gaze, a moral testament to truth's trials. Mainstream fact, his story appears in the Markandeya Purani, circa 4th to 6th century CE, emphasizing virtue's cost. Scholars still argue whether Harishchandra's ordeal reflects real ritual penances or allegorical narratives encouraging dharma. Fringe scholars insist the evaporating vat represents early Ayurvedic concepts of bittersweet karma. You chuckle. Karma goes on a diet, and you're the main course. Joke 2. On your left, a Christian icon in tempera shows Saint Januarius San Gennaro testing faith by holding a chalice of liquid blood that never empties, yet never nourishes. Mainstream fact, the relic's liquefaction miracle in Naples dates back to at least the 14th century, symbolizing divine presence amid persecution. The scholarly debate persists. Some theologians see it as genuine miracle, others argue for natural hematological explanations. Fringe folklorists add that the chalice's interior once bore an inscription warning, "Drink and thirst," though no archival evidence confirms this. You whisper, "Miraculous beverage now with 0 calories, eternal thirst guaranteed." Joke 3. The far wall features an ancient Egyptian relief of King Titi punished in Book of the Dead spells for depriving his people of water in a drought. His offerings of Nile water jars lie empty, and the ibis-headed Thoth watches impassively. Mainstream fact, spell 17 in chapter 125 instructs the soul's judgment referencing drought as divine displeasure. Egyptologists still argue whether these depictions refer to specific historical famines or serve as general warnings about misrule. Fringe vegans joke that sparing the ibis doesn't help if your farmers starve. You step onto a raised dais where a central altar holds a silver basin engraved with the names of faiths Zoroastrian, Jain, Taoist, and etched around its rim are scenes of water receding and fruit falling just out of reach. A small plaque explains that these traditions share myths of divine punishment by thirst or denial, underscoring a cross-cultural moral moderation and respect prevent cosmic curses. Scholars still argue whether these myths arose independently or spread along trade routes, like the Silk Road, cross-pollinating through merchants and pilgrims. You grin. All aboard the Mythic Express. Next stop. Everyone's got thirst. Behind the basin, a Japanese scroll depicts the kami breaker, Izanami, whose rage transforms the land into a barren wasteland where the deities thirst. A trickle of water appears at Izanami's feet, disappearing when followers approach. Mainstream fact: Kojiki 712 CE and Nihon Shoki 720 CE record storms of famine unleashed by Izanami's grief. Historians still debate whether famine motifs reflect prehistoric climate events or symbolic rites of purification. Fringe climate scientists muse the shrinking pool hints at early observations of El Niño effects. Further on, a Mayan stone stela shows the rain god Chake withholding rain from a defiant ruler, forcing him to stand by drying cenotes. Mainstream fact: Chak features prominently in classic Maya inscriptions SE 250-900 CE. Droughts in the southern lowlands likely inspired such iconography. Scholars still argue how much ritual sacrifice influenced agricultural cycles versus natural climate fluctuations. Fringe astroarchaeologists even propose alignments with Venus cycles, regulated Chak rituals, cosmic irrigation schedules, so to speak. Strolling onward, you pass a Sikh painting of Maharaja Ranjit Singh's minister, whose corruption led to wells running dry, symbolizing the loss of community trust. Guru Granth Sahib versus reference moral deficits as spiritual droughts. Historians still argue whether these references nod to literal water crises or stand as extended metaphors for leadership failures. Fringe urban planners joke that Delhi's water woes could use mythic context. A soft chime signals the room's conclusion. A massive projection mapping of Tantalus's pool morphs into each tradition's equivalent: Karun's pits, Langdharma's, Lotus Harishchandra's vat, and so on, before the iridescence fades to black. You watch droplets form on the screen's edge, each one glistening before vanishing. It's a final, echoing reminder: human cultures repeatedly craft warnings of unchecked vice, embedding them in tales of thirst and denial. You probably won't survive the next hour without Googling thirst punishment myths, but as you descend the dais, you feel the weight of shared human wisdom pressing gently on your soul. These parallels remind you that the yearning to overreach and the lesson of moderation are universal, and that myths, however varied, converge in their purpose. Before you leave, you pause by a small fountain at the room's exit. Its water flows freely into a simple stone basin, unmoved by enchantment. You dip your fingers, lift them to your lips, and drink with gratitude. The liquid is cool, open, and untainted, an offering that transcends creed. You close your eyes, savoring relief, aware that faiths differ, but compassion's well runs deep. You step into the next corridor, the soft susurrus of water accompanying you like a blessing. And as you walk on, the echo of dripping streams, drip, 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 underscores the common thread across time. And belief, unchecked pride, invites thirst, but humility invites the shared fountain of mercy. You step into a softly lit chamber where the walls are lined with screens displaying glowing feeds of social media notifications, and the air vibrates with the faint ping of incoming messages. A gentle hum of electronics underlies every sensation. A modern-day chorus echoing Tantalus's ancient torment alerts that promise connection, but recede the moment you reach to engage. You probably won't survive this digital mirage without checking your phone, but try to resist for just a moment. Your fingers hover over a touchscreen that scrolls infinitely, each swipe revealing snippets of curated lives. Champagne, flutes clink, vacation sunsets, shimmer, and success stories flash by like lightning bugs. Mainstream fact: as of 2024, the average person spends over 2 hours per day on social media platforms pursuing likes and shares that trigger dopamine rewards. Scholars still argue whether this behavior constitutes genuine social connection or a hollow simulacrum of community. You lean closer to the screen eyes, tracing an influencer's perfectly plated brunch avocado toast, dusted with microgreens coffee art swirling like a tiny galaxy. You reach to tap heart, but your finger hovers as the post shifts, new comments popping up faster than you can process. The moment you move to engage the feed, auto-refreshes nudging that desired content just out of your grasp. Fringe digital psychologists propose that app designers intentionally embed variable reward schedules like slot machines to keep users hooked, dubbing it the Tantalus algorithm. You smirk slot machines for the self-esteem economy. Joke 1. A soft glow pulses beneath your feet, an LED pathway guiding you toward a minimalist lounge area furnished with sleek chairs and tables made of polished glass. You step lightly, the glass cool beneath your toes, recalling the polished obsidian paths of Tartarus's depths. The callback is unmistakable. Both terrains demand caution in every step, lest you slip into despair. Ahead, a translucent curtain parts to reveal a table strewn with the detritus of digital obsession, tangled earbuds, half-empty water bottles, and sticky notes scrawled with to-do lists that never end. The scent here is a chemical tang, overheated batteries, lukewarm coffee, and the faintest undercurrent of citrus from a neglected air freshener. It's sensory overload, packaged as productivity. Fringe time management gurus encourage digital fasting retreats where participants hand over their devices for days, claiming it resets neural pathways. You roll your eyes and joke, retreat of the century, can't wait to miss all my emails. Joke 2. You settle into a high-backed chair facing a mirror-like screen. As you gaze, your reflection melds with overlaying metrics, follower counts, engagement graphs, and sentiment analysis bars. Your eyes widen. You see your face stamped with numbers, an avatar reduced to data points. It's a modern echo of Tantalus's pool's reflection, only here, your likeness is quantified and commodified. Mainstream research shows that self-tracking apps can both motivate healthier habits and exacerbate anxiety over metrics. Historians still argue whether self-quantification is a path to self-improvement or a slippery slope to self-obsession. A gentle chime draws your attention to a floating notification you've reached 90% of your step goal. The bar graph fills, teetering on completion. You stretch your arm fingertips, brushing the screen, yearning to tap OK, and see the final surge. Instantly, the goal resets another 10,000 steps to chase tomorrow. You exhale, sharply chest tightening, as if a vine of longing loops around your ribcage. Fringe fitness fanatics hold step races where participants compete to perpetually outdo each other in endless competition of one-upmanship that mirrors Tantalus's fruit chase. You quip softly, "Who knew my Fitbit was the new Olympian challenge?" Joke 3. In one corner, a holographic installation projects your own curated memories, family vacations, holiday dinners, milestone selfies, yet each image flickers, replaced by more flattering retakes before you can seize them. You reach out, wanting to hold the imperfect, authentic snapshot, but the moment your hand nears the image, dissolves into a perfected composite. Scholars still argue whether digital memory curation enriches personal narratives or erodes genuine recollection by privileging idealized versions. The ambient lighting shifts to a soothing blue as you step toward a console offering mindful breaks. You tentatively select the option, and soft bell tones fill the air. A guided voice whispers reminders. Breathe in, breathe out. Watch thoughts drift like clouds. You close your eyes, feeling the hush of ASMR calm you, only for a vibration in your pocket to jolt you back. A text. Urgent. We need your approval. The guided meditation falters, your breath stutters, and you realize that even your moments of respite are interrupted by external demands. Mainstream surveys indicate that 80% of office workers check their phones during breaks. Historians still argue whether boundaryless connectivity signals progress or an erosion of personal space. You rise and follow a corridor where overhead projections display real-time stock tickers, news headlines, and sports scores, a wall of noise promising that knowledge will sate your hunger for relevance. Yet each headline scrolls past in an endless loop market, crashes, viral scandals, heartbreaks, and triumphs in rapid-fire succession. You reach out to pause a segment, but find you can only skim, never linger. Fringe media theorists call this the Tantalus news cycle, where attention is fragmented into perpetual alerts. You smile wryly, irony, information famine in the info age. At the corridor's end, a small alcove offers a simple basin of water with an invitation, "Drink deeply, gratitude awaits." You lean in, tips of your fingers skimming the surface. The water ripples, then retreats as if pulled by an unseen force. A metallic click echoes a hidden valve snapping shut. You step back throat tight as the recession of water mirrors every pool you've encountered. Remember that cruel eyelash of moisture that vanished at your lips. It lives on here, in every modern iteration of desire denied. You pace slowly the screens and sounds fading into dim lighting and the soft echo of dripping overhead. The final wall bears a single word in neon script: moderation. Beneath it, a handwritten note says, "Know when enough is enough." You stand before it heart-pounding as if reading an ancient inscription carved into stone. Scholars still argue whether moderation is a practical guideline or a moralistic ideal unattainable in a world of infinite want. You lift your gaze to the ceiling where a solitary droplet clings to a metal beam. It glistens in the low light suspended in time. You watch, breath held as it falls, drip and disappears before it reaches the grid of floor below. A whisper skims past your ear. Even here, you close your eyes, letting the faint sound resound in your core, a final callback to every chamber's metronome of longing. You turn and walk toward the exit, passing one last screen that flickers between your reflection and the image of Tantalus reaching for water. You probably won't survive the urge to check your notifications once you leave, but you step forward with newfound awareness that modern yearning likes status approval. Instant gratification is the same ancient thirst recast in pixels and algorithms. Stepping through the doorway, you feel a cool breeze of real air brush your face. The drips fade into silence, leaving only the soft hum of reality. You carry with you the lesson that some desires are traps set by design, and that true relief comes not from endless pursuit, but from recognizing when to step away. You pause at the mouth of a vast chamber carved from the same stone as your own doubts, and as you step inside, the air shift's warmth settles over you like a familiar blanket. Here, the myth's cautionary core awaits the moral lessons of hubris, spun from arrogance's wreckage, and the virtue of moderation's hard-won peace. You probably won't survive this self-help seminar without Googling boundaries for overreach, but try to stay present. You're closer than ever to understanding why some fates are sealed by pride. The walls are hung with banners woven from threads of gold and obsidian, each inscribed with a single Greek word: hubris, moderation, respect limits. You run your fingers along hubris, feeling its edges fray under your touch, an apt reminder that unchecked pride unravels even the strongest garments. Mainstream fact: in ancient Athens, hubris was not just a literary trope, but a codified crime insulting or overpowering someone in a way that shamed them could land you at the magistrate's bench. Historians still argue whether this law primarily enforced social order or served as a moral bulwark against divine retribution. A fringe tidbit whispers from the shadows: some mystery cults held secret rites in which initiates symbolically cast away tokens of pride, gold coins, ornate mirrors into subterranean pits, mimicking Tantalus's own fall from favor. They believed shedding vanity would shield them from fate's cruel designs. You smirk. My last vanity purge involved deleting old selfies felt ritualistic enough. Joke 1. Ahead, a pedestal holds a single silver scale, its pans perfectly balanced. One side bears a bronze token engraved, "Me," the other, a cluster of tokens reading "Others." You lift the "Me" token, feeling its weight familiar, reassuring. But as you set it back, the scale wobbles, reminding you that tipping too far toward self can topple equilibrium. Mainstream sources cite Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, 4th century BCE, where he defines virtue as the golden mean between excess and efficiency. Historians still argue whether Aristotle intended his ethical midpoint as a practical guideline or as a lofty ideal accessible only to philosophical elites. You lean in to inspect the tokens, noting faint shimmer microscopic runes someone carved centuries ago. Know thyself, then know when to bow. Fringe etymologists claim these runes combine Greek and Phoenician letters, a nod to shared Mediterranean wisdom. You chuckle softly. Who knew I'd need a Rosetta Stone app in the underworld? At the room's center, a circular pool mirrors your reflection. Its surface is still inviting until you dip a finger in, and waves ripple outward, distorting your image. It flickers between regal posture and slumped shoulders, a visual echo of pride's rise and fall. The voice in your mind, the gentle hosts, reminds you pride inflates your image until reality deflates it. Historians still argue whether water symbolism in Greek myth pointed primarily to hospitality values or served as moral commentary on human vanity. A soft rustle draws your gaze upward to frescoes depicting scenes of well-known hubristic downfalls, Niobe's boast shattered by Artemis's arrows, Arachne's tapestry undone by Athena's displeasure, and Icarus's wings melting as he soared too close to Helios. Each tableau pulses with kinetic tension colors that might drip if you stare too long. You recall your own flights of ambition, the times you pushed boundaries until something snapped. Fringe psychologists link hubris to a spike in cortisol and testosterone, suggesting a biological cocktail that clouds judgment scholars call it the Icarus effect. You grin wryly, and here I thought my morning coffee was the real risk factor. Joke 3. You wander between the frescoes, each step echoing the patter of raindrops in earlier chambers, a private ASMR track of humility. The next wall features a mirror mosaic shards depict you at various moments of overreach, raising your hand too forcefully in debate, posting unsolicited takes online, stretching deadlines for more extravagance. You feel a pinch. These glimmers of your own hubris reflect back with unflinching honesty. At the far end, a narrow doorway labeled metanoia, Greek for change of mind, beckons. You step through into a cozy alcove draped in soft fabric and lit by amber lanterns. A low table holds a single journal and quill. The host's voice drifts. True moderation begins with introspection. You settle onto a velvet cushion, feeling its plush support cradle your resolve. Mainstream therapeutic practice endorses journaling to track triggers of overconfidence, linking self-awareness exercises to reduced risk-taking behavior in clinical studies. Therapists still argue whether structured reflection or spontaneous free-writing yields deeper insights. You uncurl your fingers around the quill and begin to write a recent instance of pride that backfired the moment you mistook luck for skill, the email you sent without review. With each line, you feel tension ease, words untangle the knot of self-importance. The alcove's hush encourages each scratch on parchment like a sacred ritual of humility. After a while, you close the journal and rise feeling lighter. In the alcove's corner stands a small fountain, its basin carved from white marble. Water flows soft and steady, no tricks here, offering genuine refreshment. You cup your hands and drink deeply. The liquid glides down your throat, honest and unguarded. You exhale, tasting gratitude more than mere moisture. Stepping back into the main chamber, you approach the balance scale again. This time, you place one token each on me and others. The scale settles evenly. You smile, recognizing the equilibrium of respect and humility. The banners on the wall seem to glow brighter. Limits now reads like a comforting boundary rather than a barrier. You glide toward the exit, the room's temperature softening as if wrapping you in a gentle cloak. The final inscription reads, "Those who measure pride with care will sip from life's chalice without spilling." You linger for a heartbeat, letting the words sink into your bones. Before you leave, you glance once more at the pool of reflection. No ripples disturb its calm. You reach forward, fingertips brushing the surface, and see yourself steady, balanced, wise, not by erasing desire, but by guiding it. You step through the doorway, the echo of dripping water fading behind you. The path ahead is lit by lanterns that promise neither excess nor deprivation, but a measured glow of mindful clarity. As you walk on toward Section 20, you carry this lesson that moderation is not meekness, but mastery of the self, and that humility is the key to quenching thirsts both ancient and modern. You step into a gentle twilight, where the cavern's stone walls glow with a soft, diffused luminescence, and the air feels weightless, as if each molecule pauses to exhale in unison. You inhale slowly, tasting the faint trace of wild mint and lavender, and notice how your skin tingles in its own quiet acknowledgement. In this hush, the echo of every receding drop has faded into a gentle murmur, and you realize that the chase is over for tonight. You probably won't survive this serene epilogue without drifting off mid-sentence, but take comfort, tomorrow's sun will still rise. A canopy of ghostly stalactites hangs overhead, their tips barely brushing the ripples of a still pool whose surface is now resolutely calm. You approach and see your reflection framed by the soft glow, a visage unburdened of longing, your eyes heavy-lidded and content. Mainstream fact, by the early 21st century sleep aid podcasts and guided bedtime stories became a multi-billion-dollar industry used by over 30 million listeners each night to ease insomnia. Historians still argue whether these narrated myths serve as genuine psychological tools or simply modern lullabies for stressed adults. You settle on a mossy stone bench whose cushion of lichen is cooler than you expected, and you feel the tension drain from your shoulders, each breath a soft sigh of relief. A fringe tidbit: some devoted sleepers claim that after listening to this very myth of Tantalus, they taste a hint of pomegranate in their dreams, a sensory echo of your ancient chase. You smirk, delicious nightmares now gluten-free. Joke 1. Above you, a solitary glowworm pulses in time with your slowing heartbeat, creating a private light show that feels choreographed just for your calm. Researchers still debate whether bioluminescent accompaniment enhances relaxation or can startle the mind into wakefulness. You lean your head back and allow your eyelids to brush shut, each flutter like a curtain descending on a weary stage. A thin tendril of cool mist curls around your ankles, playful and affectionate proof that even in this mythical underworld, elements conspire gently to hush you into stillness. You place a hand on the bench's damp surface, feeling its ancient coolness spread through your palm in a subtle massage of reassurance. You probably won't survive the sensation without a second giggle, but you try anyway. Joke 2. In the distance, an unseen stream hums a lullaby, a soft, uneven rhythm that you feel more than you hear. It is a water song of contentment, the opposite of the cruel metronome you encountered before, and you realize that the same element that punished now redeems. A whisper drifts through the space rest. Its single syllable is both command and caress. You press your palm to the pool's edge and feel warmth where once was chill, as though the water itself remembers your journey and invites you home. A scholar might note that ambient temperature changes can signal safety to the brain, easing the transition to sleep, though researchers still argue whether these cues work subliminally or require conscious perception. You exhale, letting the warmth seep into your bones, and you feel the last coils of tension unwind. Your senses narrow to the sensation of breath moving in and out, the gentle hum of unseen life all around, and the soft brush of moss beneath you. No torches flare, no statues glare. Even the drip, drip, drip has become a single distant heartbeat. You smile, realizing that this mythic pilgrimage has delivered you from longing into rest. Joke 3. Side effects may include sudden napping. Now soften your breathing and allow your thoughts to drift like leaves on still water. Let each exhale carry away the last bright echoes of Tantalus' struggle. The thirsting, the striving, the ceaseless reaching. Feel the cavern's gentle glow settle around you like a soft shawl as warmth fills your chest and calms your mind. The world outside these walls may pulse with urgency, but here time pauses, wrapping you in a lull of infinite kindness. Imagine golden droplets of memory, each one a fragment of your day, gently floating away downstream, leaving your mind clear and open. There is nothing you must do now except rest. Every breath deepens the stillness. Every heartbeat threads you closer to the quiet center within. Should a stray worry edge its way into your awareness, simply see it as a leaf on water, drifting past without demand. In this soothing darkness, you are safe. No thirst remains to torment you. No fruit hangs just beyond reach. There is only the soft rustle of the cavern's breath, a tender echo of your own. Let your eyelids rest as if they are curtains drawing closed on the stage of wakefulness. Let your body sink into the cushion of moss, heavy and comfortable, as the ancient stones cradle you in their cool embrace. In this interval between breaths, find the effortless calm that waits at the heart of every bedtime story. Let it hold you until dawn, a quiet guardian keeping watch at the threshold between dreaming and waking. When you finally cross into sleep, carry this calm with you, a gentle current guiding your dreams toward peaceful shores. Now hush your thoughts, close your eyes, and surrender to sleep's embrace, knowing you are tended and safe. May your dreams be soft and your rest deep.